Brian?
I can hear you guys all pretty well, so that's good. Should we go ahead and call things to order?
Yes.
All right. Would all who wish join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have 3 proposed agenda adjustments. I would propose to add or motion to add item 15, executive session under 40560 labor negotiations. Item 8C, at approving a change of date and board meeting. And item 8.d.i.1, generative AI guidelines. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or other proposed agenda changes? We'll go ahead and vote. Since I'm remote, it has to be a roll call. Jake?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Noah?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Motion carries 5-0. Next up, I would make a motion to, oops, sorry, I was going to skip minutes. I would make a motion to approve the minutes of December 5th as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or corrections?
In the folder, Brian, there was also data workshop minutes. Those aren't listed on the agenda. I don't know if we want to, there aren't really any minutes there, but we should probably approve those.
Yeah, we probably should. I'll do that in a separate motion. Any questions or corrections to the regular meeting minutes? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Jake?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Noah?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. I would make a motion to approve the minutes from December, what's the date? December 5th, the data workshop. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or corrections? We'll go ahead and vote. Jake?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Noah?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. They both carry 5-0. I would make a motion. This is a long list of warrants. I would make a motion to approve regular warrants 12, 12A, 13, 14, payroll warrants 12, 13, 14, ban warrant 47, main purse warrants for November and December of 2023, and capital improvement reserve warrants 1, 2, and 3. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? Go ahead and vote. Jake?
Aye.
Noah?
Aye.
I went out of order. Sorry. Kevin?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Carries 5-0. The floor is now open for public comment. I don't see anybody on Zoom. Is there anybody in the room?
Public comment now.
All right, seeing no public comment, we'll go ahead and move on to acknowledgements. Jake?
Nothing at this time.
Kevin?
Nothing at this time.
Noah? Mark?
Yeah, I don't have anything tonight either. Thank you.
Students, anything you want to acknowledge?
We have a couple. Big shout out to everyone cramming for midterms tonight and for the rest of the week. And also a shout out to everyone involved in show choir. There's been a lot of planning and a lot of doing the last couple of days. And NHS induction is Wednesday of next week. Congratulations to everyone in, and best of luck to all of the already inductees in finishing their bios before Friday. And ASO show choir starts up next Thursday. Is so good. That's all we've got. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Meredith?
Since we've last met, we've had a lot of concerts happening, although not always on the night they were originally scheduled. That was a super big challenge with the weather we had in December. So, but at this time we've had all the planned concerts happen, and just, you know, great job by all performers and conductors. It was really a special treat to have all of those regardless of when they took place. So, big acknowledgement to those groups.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have principal reports. Carrie's not able to be here tonight, so we can just read her report. Richard.
Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay there. And so I want to start off, we're right in the, not in the middle of, but at the beginning part of budget season and planning ahead and thinking for next year. So that's going well, and teachers should have their individual classroom budget back my way by the end of the week. So looking forward to getting those up and exploring that a little further and planning ahead to next year. Recently, we had our OMS dental clinic canceled due to one of our storm days. So I'm pleased to announce that that is back on the calendar and coming up here in February. I believe the date is February 2nd. And I think I put it the first in my board report, but I believe that's the second. And so we're looking forward to getting that up and running. We're going to have them one time visiting our schools this year. And some good news. OMS, we recently received a letter from an email rather from the U.S. News and World Report. Just like they do college rankings and high school rankings, they also do rankings for middle schools. And I was pleased to note that OMS was ranked among the top 20 best middle schools in the state of Maine. And so it's nice to receive that recognition. And I included a note in the board report, and there's a link there with more information around the criteria, et cetera, for that. So I'd like to recognize two students, two young OMS scientists who are excelling at the National STEM Challenge, and Ivriu and Malaf Mohammed. I like to recognize them as qualifying finalists in the National STEM Challenge. And Malas submitted a proposal based on his winning the Maine State Science Fair project. And it's about plant growth in microgravity. And Ivory wrote an entirely new proposal in short order, I might add. And her proposal is about making less carbon intensive burgers from mushrooms instead of from beef. So so good for Malaf and Ivory, so they're on to the next level, and so we'll see how it goes. We wish them best of luck as they continue on with that. Right around the corner is the end of the Q2 ranking period, I believe next Friday, the 19th. And so right around the 26th or so, report cards will be going out to parents. And this year we switched to, as you know, to electronic report cards. We are sending paper report cards home for any families who request it. And also as an added measure, we're sending paper copies home for students with a D or an F, just to make sure those parents are informed. So. And looking forward to the upcoming PD days, in particular, our discussion on AI, and looking forward to learning more about that topic, and our religion and spiritual traditions panel discussion with Dr. Kat Bill, two of the things that I'm looking forward to, in particular, upcoming PD days. And I also included the science assessment results that we received recently from last year, and that would have been our 8th graders, this year's freshmen, OMS, who are OMS freshmen, 8th graders last year, if that makes sense. And so if my calculations are correct, we had 79.6% of our students at state expectations or above state expectations on that assessment among our 8th graders. And last but not least is we met this week with Penobscot Valley Middle League officials, and our winter tournaments and end of season championships are planned out, and we'll be wrapping most of those things up before February vacation, and our spelling bee is right after February vacation on the 27th. So looking forward to those end of season events. And that's my report for tonight.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the high school. Sam or Meredith?
Hi, everybody. In preparing this co-principal report, I recognize that it's been quite a duration of time, but in that duration of time, there's been a lot to celebrate and recognize. So I included it all in your report, and I am going to highlight a little bit of it here. But certainly if I don't say something out loud, it's not because it's not warranting that recognition. So I hope you've enjoyed the read of all the accomplishments and celebrations of our students and staff. One of the first ones is we're very excited at the OHS main office to welcome Lisa Basson as our new administrative assistant. I think Lynn would echo with me, as well as our office staff, that this time of year to enter into that role is quite a challenge, but she's taking it head on and she's willing to learn, which includes, as Richard mentioned, working with Lynn and I and others in the development of the budget and putting that into the systems and all those pieces. So we really welcome Lisa. We're excited to have her as a member of our team. There were students right after the Thanksgiving break that were inducted into the first ever Orono High School Mu Alpha Theta Math National Honor Society. That's a huge honor to them, well deserved. And just to be the first group of kids to really help us and Miss Holmes recognize that level of accomplishment in math is pretty special. So congratulations to all of them. As well in math, and including all of those kids, the math team just continues to be very strong, have high representations in their competitions, and we look forward to continuing to cheer them on as their season continues. As many know, Ruth White competed once again in the Foot Locker Cross Country National Championships in San Diego back in November as well. She did a fantastic job earning 6th place. We just continue to be supportive and proud of her as an Orono Red Riot runner. Pierce Walston achieved the 1,000 points earlier in this basketball season, which is a high accomplishment, not only to him, but also to his teammates who have been with him all the way through, as well as his coaching staff and supportive like people who cheer him on and support him from the bleachers and the sidelines. So congratulations, Pierce. There were a lot of recognitions for accomplishments of students in the fall season, both for their accomplishments on the fields for like football, soccer, but also how that matched with their continued accomplishments within the classroom. So all those students and kids who were honored in various like arenas and or meetings. So congratulations to all of you. And also to that, Coach Bob Sinclair was selected by his peers as the LTC Coach of the Year. So congratulations to Coach Sinclair. And as everyone knows, that was a tremendous season that he led our team through and to the accomplishment of the state title. The awards committee, and I included a link there, but the awards committee, as I have mentioned previously, continues to meet, but did a great deal of work last year, both as a committee, but then reaching out to our staff for feedback and working with them to try to make sure that we're communicating more clearly and more effectively about the criteria and the way in which students receive awards, what the award means, what they earn and what they receive. And some of those changes, just to highlight a few, however, you can see in the link, all the changes that we've done in a spreadsheet that we've created throughout that process. But some include that the Unsung Hero Awards are now being given during all 3 seasons, and to not just athletics, but also the arts programming and math team and chess team as well, that fall within our extracurricular expectations and handbook guide. We also are, as I said, including the arts in the awards as well. So we've always had Athlete of the Year, but now we also have 3 awards given to some of our students in the performing arts that are very similar to the Athletes of the Year. We created the template that the big spreadsheet, but then each award has its own template, really breaking it down as to all the process and the explanation of each award. And we also have removed gender from all of our awards to be more equitable and reaching all of our students. And we've tried very hard to streamline the nomination and voting processes so that all along the year, as these things are given out, it's a smoother and more effective process. As I said, that group continues to meet. We're not meeting. We used to meet bi-weekly, and then we went to monthly, and now we're like every other month, just continuing to challenge ourselves to review, take feedback, make adjustments to make sure that we are honoring our students for all their achievements in a way that makes sense and as a way that really truly celebrates their efforts. We have once again a Quiz Bowl team who is seeded to go compete again tomorrow, but weather may not permit that. And Troy Wagstaff is leading them, but so good luck to them. It's a really neat opportunity for them that they've really initiated and worked hard along. I believe Meredith Diamond has also played a key role in that. So congratulations and good luck. If tomorrow doesn't work out, I'm sure they'll reschedule, and we're definitely cheering you guys on. As far as collaborations with families, we wanted to just thank everybody who has continued to complete the surveys that we've given out to really help us in our efforts in the variety of committees we're in and the work that we're trying to achieve. We also did have our very first parent advisory group meeting for this year. It was nice to see those that attended and get some feedback and insights, and we look forward to having those moving forward. We also just want to say there was numerous, and there has been, and there will continue to be numerous fundraising events for this year, particularly, in the senior class as they're ending their high school career. They're really planning a very significant and fun trip. And so we just thank everybody who's continuing to help that class and our other groups and classes in their efforts to raise the money they need to have those experiences. The JMG students, along with Angie Katala at the head, really did another fantastic job of organizing the Angel Tree, which is an effort where we reach out to the community and provide gifts for certain students and their families during the holiday season. It's just amazing the amount of packages that come into the lobby, and watching all of our students have that joy of wrapping them and knowing they're going to make another student happy, and maybe their siblings as well. Great effort. Congratulations and thank you for all those things. You really made kids smile. Also in that same way, we once again, both Thanksgiving, the school counseling team worked together at all 3 levels with the Masons Lodge and IGA to be able to donate Thanksgiving baskets of food. Unfortunately, because of the storm we got, they couldn't give the actual food during the holiday break, but they were able to give gift cards that allowed families to still go out and get the foods and have those pleasantries during their holidays. And so thank you so much to all the efforts from our school counseling staff and with those groups of individuals. And then we are entering what we're calling our recruiting season. And we have this image here that you I shared with you has been created by Holly Gunn and our recruitment committee, in an effort to just really demonstrate and show everyone all the efforts that we're doing at this point, and all the different events that go on in our recruitment process, with our intentions of really showing every student that they have a place here at Orono High School. And I just had a meeting today where the recruitment group is really excited, working alongside with school counseling and Meredith Diamond to really get out there and show them why they should choose Orono High School and all the magnificent things we have. So it's an exciting time of year. It's a busy time of year, but recruitment is always a fun thing. And this year we're working alongside our ambassador program for the first time, which has really been fun. It's really a cool endeavor to have so many students involved from the get-go. And I think for me, that is it. So I appreciate you listening, and congratulations to everyone. And since the last co-principal report. Go ahead, Meredith.
Thank you, Sam. So recruitment for next year is one of a handful of things that are currently underway. Thinking about what comes next for us and what can we be doing now to make sure that we get it right. And while we're in recruitment season, we're also in the season of new course proposals. Folks are thinking about what comes next for our department, given in some places faculty changes that we have seen recently. So we have significant changes being proposed in both technology classes and choral arts that I think are really going to be exciting for students as new opportunities they haven't had before. But in addition, just keeping an eye back to that reflection on our evolving student profile that we shared back in September, and thinking about, as the world is changing and as our students are changing along with it, how does that invite changes in how we approach programming? And so those will be going before the February curriculum committee, and I'm really excited about them. Another change that is, really just a little bit of nuance, but that we're hoping is going to have a big impact for access to programming is a shift at UTC coming for next year. One shift is that UTC is adding an additional program in introduction to teaching. So giving students who are interested in going into education a chance to find out more about what that's like and hopefully equip them to make better, more informed decisions about post-secondary programming. And we are also going to have all of our special education teachers visiting UTC in advance of this selection season there, because UTC experiences what they call MELT each year, which is when students who are enrolled in programs discontinue their participation in that program at some point early in the year because it just wasn't the right fit for them. And when that happens, those seats remain vacant for the rest of the year. And so UTC is aiming to ensure that students are as informed and as well advised as possible in choosing of their programming. And so their hope is that by having special education teachers and case managers on site to see what their programs are, they'll be able to better advise students. In terms of, what is currently happening in the classroom, we have a Rise Center partnership that is continuing that is for those folks who know it's at work, it's something that you can hear echoes of both in professional and student conversations. And I'm really excited to see what that might bring for our math instruction in future years. And we just concluded the first round of AP Research IRB. Students had to put together IRB applications. Carrie James from the Maine Math and Science Alliance was generous and in volunteering his time to be part of that review. And it was a rigorous process that involved students having to pay a lot of attention to detail, but in reading through their proposals, it's really exciting to see what is coming out of this first round of AP Research students. So those students are starting to launch their studies, and we look forward to the conclusion of them so that we can share their findings and hopefully share them in a showcase of learning that we are anticipating holding in May. And lastly, in our continued effort to be, thinking carefully about things that have big impacts, our faculty meeting this month involved discussion about a recent article in The Atlantic titled "Are Phones Making the World's Students Dumber?" And we know the role that phones have in our lives. And I think that the question for us is thinking about what that means for our work in schools, and then ultimately what our responsibility is in the face of that. And so that was a generative conversation among faculty that will certainly continue in months to come. So that concludes our report for this month.
Great, thank you. Any questions? I'd just like to recognize all the hard work that goes into the recruiting process. It's a little bit unfair, but it's financially important to the district as well as to the academic and social success of the high school. So I appreciate, and I know it takes a lot of work, so I appreciate that. I also just wanted to recognize the ongoing efforts and awards. The high school's really just dug in on taking that to heart and thinking very intentionally about the awards. I don't think I saw any other comments. Meredith, you want to do the superintendent's report? Oh, no, sorry.
Yeah, I guess on the awards, I appreciate the work going into that. I was just wondering if there's any more, thought towards, think about alternative, whether there was any conversation in those about alternative, modes of recognizing all students or having student self-award or student success, or these different student success showcase, or these different ways we talked about of broadening the sorts of end of year recognition beyond sort of I appreciate cleaning up the individual awards, but was there any discussion in those groups about alternate modes, or just curious?
So Meredith Diamond, I can try to answer that if you have anything else to add. So the work that the committee did last year and up till now was to clean up what we've done and to reevaluate the value and worth and all the things I said about those ones. Moving forward, we're looking at expanding on how and in what capacity we recognize and celebrate our students' accomplishments. And so those kind of conversations, to answer, have not happened yet, except they might have happened in small groups. Like there are certain celebrations that happen within classes and within certain groups of students with their faculty that sometimes does involve family members, sometimes doesn't, but that's the next step. The work we were really trying to do was be sure that we were being clear and equitable and transparent and really clean up the ones that we've done and really say, is this something we want to continue? So that was the work thus far.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Meredith.
I have a few items to report on outside of the agenda items to come. First, obviously, weather is probably on everyone's mind tonight, and no, I don't have an announcement today. I'm waiting until after the board meeting to look at things. But just want to recognize really efforts of a few individuals and kind of what happened with the storm that we had just right before we dismissed for vacation. So obviously we had the power outage for a couple of days here, and as you know, we don't have backup generators that are meaningfully helpful to, continue systems. Those are in the COPS grants, so we will in the nearish future have those. But for now, it's quite impactful when you have a storm like that. So Bill, worked with some of his contacts, and we got some 3-phase generators because our electric systems are 3-phase to get our heating system going on that second day once we realized that we were still out and the temperatures were dropping soon. So that comes at a cost. Sorry. But it was worth the kind of peace of mind to know if we were going another night without insurance, we would have been really uncomfortable. Also, we had some food loss, and Ben worked to kind of mitigate that as much as possible. Also, Tim's here on another topic, but Tim's the superintendent in VZ, and VZ had offered to let us bring some items over should we need it, but we got power back in the time frame that we were going to either move some things over to VZ to help us not have further loss, or we were going to get power back. So but again, generators will help with that as well in the future. And then finally, we did have a loss of our firewall with the power surge, off and on, that we Jason had to work. It really didn't go down until right after we dismissed for break, and it was kind of investigated to go back to that being the cause of the power surges that had happened with it. So they had to work quickly because they're just, in this day and age, you're so vulnerable without a firewall with all of the cyber attacks that can happen. So I appreciate the efforts of those individuals to kind of mitigate loss during that time. We recently advertised for engineering and architectural services to assist us with the preparation of a school construction application for our middle school. In anticipation of the application window opening soon, the Department of Education scheduled and they've said that they plan on accepting applications this spring. They haven't opened them up yet, but in order to do the kind of work to be ready for that and to really position ourselves as favorably as possible, we are going to, engage services. We only got one response from our ad, and it's Haley Ward that we've worked with quite a bit. So we plan on having a follow-up meeting with them now to discuss some of the details and get a cost, because that's not part of an RFQ, to figure out how we're going to move forward. But all along, this has been our plan to be ready to submit this application when the window opened up again. So we're working on that. recently I attended a CDS, a Department of Education webinar about the transition from CDS to one of the responsibilities that they have is providing services for 3 and 4-year-olds who need special services. And legislation happened several years ago that require a transition of that responsibility from CDS to local school districts. And I've kind of been blissfully like just waiting on more details and not really engaged too much with it because I knew there was a lot to be worked out, but this webinar really gave some helpful information. There's still a lot to work out. But basically by the year 26, 27, all of this transition will have taken place. They anticipate doing it in chunks, with the first third being next year of schools to make that transition, and then another third the next year, another third the next year. This is, you know, there's a lot that's going to need to be figured out around this. And one of the things that was a takeaway for me from that webinar is that it does not mean necessarily that we will now have in our schools programming for all of these students, but we'll be responsible for it. So they're, you know, right now, for the most part, those students are served outside of local school districts. And that will continue to be the case probably for some of those students and some of those students not. So that's something that we're going to have to work on and figure out. And, you know, Lisa and her team will be really responsible for some of that, but it really will, you know, be a capacity issue for Lisa and her team that we're going to have to look at. And because I feel like they're already, you know, stretched far and wide. So that's something that Lisa and I haven't even had a chance to catch up since I had, you know, the webinar. And I know she's been plugged into hearing about those things, but that's just something on the horizon that's a new responsibility and it's going to mean we'll need more capacity in district to take on that responsibility. They did say that this will be funded outside of the formula, which I found really interesting. So we'll see what that means. So more to come. And finally, just there's obviously a lot of plates we're spending around normal things happening this time of year, our budget, but also our work in strategic planning, our work on the well-being committee, and all the other work of the district. So it's a busy time, but we are happy to be you know, moving forward to plan for how we finish up this year successfully, but also with an eye to next year. So do you have any questions about any of those items? Going to transition to the audit next, Brian.
Did you have a Spain trip on the agenda? It was on the agenda. Did you have something to say about that?
Oh, yeah, I forgot it's there, not on the action item. I'm sorry. Yes, so in your packet, there is some explanation about an itinerary change that we were informed of from the company. And the company did not have enough students to be able to run the itinerary that we had planned for. So now the trip is
So now they got a better trip.
yeah, well, I guess it depends on what the goals are. It's less, you know, Spain intensive. It's Spain light.
Nothing against Spain. It is a cool.
Yeah, so the itinerary now starts in Zurich and goes Zurich, Lucerne, Barcelona, and yeah, ends in Spain. So whereas the whole trip previously was in Spain, now it's, I think, 2 or 3 days in Spain, which, you know, for Angela doesn't really, is not what she wanted for the trip, but it'll still be a great experience for students. And, you know, I don't think you need to vote again on this, unless you feel like you should. I don't think by policy, it's just more of a notification, and the, you know, the wheels on this have already moved forward. I think we could have pulled the plug, but really didn't feel the need to pull the plug on that, so this is, a notification. All the students that were going are still going, and they picked up another student in that process as well. So the trip is still, you know, ready to go with, the previous approval. So do you have any concerns or questions about this change?
Why, why couldn't?
Companies, you know, need a certain amount of participants in order to make the trip feasible financially, probably. You know, we don't have a large enough group that we alone probably could carry the services for an entire trip, so. This itinerary that we now have is probably a more commonly asked for itinerary that would have more students.
Massachusetts.
Yeah, I asked, what was the concern, why did they change it, and it was all about the numbers. Anything else on that?
I think we can just let it pass unless somebody on the board wants to take it to a vote. Not seeing that, we'll go ahead and move on to the audit.
So, Craig is here, from Brancher, Thibodeau and Associates, and, we just appreciate our work with Craig, longstanding work with, him, and he's going to give you an overview, as he typically does, of the audit. I will put it up on the screen so everyone can follow along. You also have it in the board folder, so. Right,
All right,
thank
good
you for
evening.
being here.
I can be brief. This year, the audit went as smooth as I've had in a long time here. We didn't have hardly any comments, so I appreciate the office staff and what they did all year. It was very well done and put together for us to put it all together. So that being said, I will probably just focus on just a few pages, three pages mostly. And it's gonna be page 17 first. A lot of pages.
And Lynn's on the call as well, if we have questions for her.
So what I want to focus on here is just to give you an overview of your year-end fund balances, how they turned out. So you can see in that first column on the general fund side, your general operating budget fund. So down at the bottom, you'll see total fund balances of $2,995,000 carried over, with some offsets being committed for debt service stabilization, and then a larger unassigned balance of $2,883,000. On those other columns, you'll see just your other funds, unbudgeted funds, or funds you transfer from money into from your fund balance. So you get your grants, student funds, and scholarship funds in the special revenue, and then your capital projects, which is still carrying some of the projects that are ongoing, as well as your reserves that you set funds aside for. And then on the final column is your food service fund. Any questions on that page? Just a brief overview. Page 19, Meredith. So this is how you arrive at those fund balances in each of those funds. So you can see on the general fund side, your overall increase was 93,000 to get to the 2,995,000. So in our world, like for a school district, I'd say that was kind of a perfect budgeting situation. And I'll point that out on another page. So you as you know, you're restricted on some of your carry forwards to a certain percentage. You're kind of holding right in there, and also the way you have it planned out for the future gets you in compliance with that rule. So the only other thing I would highlight on this page is your food service had a small loss this year, but still holding out okay on the carry forward of 204,000.
Where's that line? Sorry.
That's the final, the fourth column.
Okay.
Yes, the government. And then the reduction to the capital projects is just your regular projects. We can run through that. So I'm gonna flip all the way through the footnotes. The footnotes in between these statements are just additional information that supports some of these numbers and give you more detail on those. So if you want to assist yourselves on learning some of those numbers and where they come from. But page 49, Meredith, we're just gonna do the budget versus actual.
That it?
Next page.
Okay, this one.
Should be, oh, yeah, sorry, see the page 40, yeah, that one, sorry. So, what I mean by the perfect budget in this, to explain here is you had, so you budgeted revenues to come in at 15,268,000. You took in 15,660,000. So you had a positive variance of 391,000 of revenues. On the expenditure side, we did have to do a cost center transfer for an overage of 36,937. But other than that, you budgeted to expend 16,490,000 and only spent 15,531,000. So you had another positive variance of 929,000. So you did budget to take a lot from your carry forward, which is great. But you also added that back in. So you netted out that 93,000. So it ended up being like a very perfect scenario in the end, where you still added to your fund balance, but maintained where you needed to be. So overall, it was a great audit. It was clean. Not much to comment about, really. It was much improved on a lot of areas. So.
Any questions from the board?
I don't really question, just say, look at us go, right? Especially Lynn, fine work, she's on here.
Yes.
It's good every year, but this is the almost. I did have one question on the other matter that's in your.
Oh,
report.
yeah.
What is the capital assets you didn't identify?
So those are, so on another schedule, which I didn't go over, if it's the added schedule is required for governments, is just tracking, you have to bring on fixed assets, not, it's outside of budget, or you do it as a capitalized business. And so that's also a required element. It was just what we noted was just a recommendation to maintain that asset log. And that it needs to be not just on his side, but also on the business office side. So just working together to ensure that all assets get tracked and put on that schedule.
Thank you.
So it wasn't a major thing, just something direct.
I think it was the vending machines that were purchased in food service that were not on the asset list that kind of led to that recommendation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And, big thanks to Lynn and the financial team. A lot of work goes into all year having a clean audit, but also when the auditors were here and we just value the partnership with Craig and his team because it really just helps us learn and grow as an organization to be able to, talk through issues all year when we are short on something. So, and we really like the audits. Yeah. The best kind of report. Much of it is a great report. So
yeah.
Brian, anything else from you?
No, that's it. Thank you, Craig. That's clear and concise. And and I would just third the thanks and commendations to Lynn and the finance team. I know she sweats this every year and takes every little ding very personally, so it's only fair she gets to celebrate the clean reports too.
Thank you. And I want to also thank Craig as well, because he's great all year. Anytime I have a question, answering us quickly and being very helpful. So thank you to him as well.
Now the only question for Lynn is how's she going to one-up herself next year?
I think I need to go away before next year. No, just kidding.
No, that's not allowed.
We'll find a way. We'll find a way.
And It's this and the year-end projection that she sweats over every year. She hates the year-end projection as well. Okay, thanks, Craig. Appreciate your time.
Thank
That's good.
Next up, we have the athletic field fundraising discussion. This is just a discussion, not specific decisions, but I think Meredith's at a point where she wants some board feedback. You want to introduce it, Meredith?
Yes. We were approached several months ago by a group of parents who were interested in assisting with some fundraising to accomplish some projects out back. And we started meeting and just, listening to what the goals and the hopes were for the project. Bill and Mike, is Mike on now? Mike's coming. Oh, there he is. Bill and Mike and I have been meeting with the team and have been, going through a process to hear what the hopes are and then go and do some work to figure out, well, what would the cost be on that? And what would the, process be for that? And so tonight we've asked a group of those individuals to come and just share a little bit about their vision and what they hope this project can do for our schools and the community. And then I'll kind of close. Well, I guess I'll just say that the frame that we've approached this with is how can we support this fundraising effort to happen. And I think this committee is really looking at how can they support this project and then potentially projects into the future. And we've been talking as a board about how to develop kind of alumni networks and tap into potential that's out there, we feel, to support Orono and RSU 26 schools into the future. And I think that's what this group has a real vision for getting that started with this first project. And we envision this project as a cost share between the district and the team that would be the fundraising team. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to the team, and they have a slide deck that you have in your board folder, but I will put it on the screen so we can look at it together as we'll talk. So do you want to just introduce yourself to the board members so they know who you are, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Laura Mitchell, you probably sadly already know me. And
Not sadly.
my daughter is a freshman, and I have a son in 7th grade at Orono, and my husband.
Hello, Don Mitchell.
And I'm Tim Tweedy, community member, parent of 3 children here in the school district. And someone who has been familiar with, we're looking at benefiting both the Nordic program and the soccer program with our initial idea. And then again, we want to expand upon that. Someone who coached against Orono for 14 years and really came to appreciate all the, the community did to support the kids and how just well run the programs. So someone who's known Mr. Archer and Scott Meredith served over the last few years. And I believe I'm kind of, first up to bat here. I guess I do want to thank, sorry, but.
So I'm not closely affiliated. I guess I'm closely affiliated with this group, but I'm happy to know, and most of you know me, happily know me, I'm sure. But I have been working with Julie Cartery on sort of keeping the Orono boosters going over the past couple of years. And I think you'll see as go along how that connects to this project.
So, I mean, at first, I do want to thank the board for being open-minded to this. We're saying Meredith, Mike, and Bill in the forefront for entertaining the idea. I guess I'll keep this succinct. Our idea initially was how it can benefit the soccer and Nordic programs by putting some lights up on the field. And when I say the programs, it is the student athletes, it's the coaches, but it's also parents. Getting out of work to get to games is not often very easy. This Coach Dijak put it to me in a text, which she asked me to share. oftentimes our opposing fans have more fans at the beginning of the game than what our home fans do, because we don't have lights in the fall time. We start to lose sunlight pretty early. And having come from a school district, who has lights previously to when we moved to Orono, I found it as a great benefit as a coach, to sometimes be able to go scout opponents and come back and have an evening practice, to allow our student athletes to go work with our rec programs, to build your programs, and then have an evening practice. Or to have an early practice and you know, just having a lot of those options. Sometimes, you know, the student athletes would, especially before school in August, elect to practice early in the morning. You know, sometimes right as the sun was coming up, so we turn the lights off for the first half hour, so they can have the rest of their day free, while the kids, because it's still summertime. So just so many benefits that we saw, in addition to building the program, building excitement, having fans and those sorts of things. So being friends with Don and Laura, we started having some conversations, and I guess organically, we came up with the idea that we'd like to fundraise, but then from there, this really kind of became a two-pronged approach, where we thought it shouldn't just stop with this. As community members would really want to see the benefits of building that alumni network, and we have some energy and some passion. We thought maybe if we could get this first project underway, we'd really like to carry it forward. And Laura's really the brains and the heart behind this, so I guess I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, and I think I spent some time in the concession booth, working with boosters over the past few months. And just kind of came to understand that the Orono Boosters program really needs to be amped up in terms of the structure, organization, governance, transparency, and in so doing will increase its capacity to fundraise for the Orono schools. And so that's why we came up with this document, just to kind of share our vision of turning the Boosters program back into an actual 501c3 and using it as a vehicle to improve excellence, not just for sporting teams, but for all extracurricular activities, whether it's math team, robots, chess teams, whatever is needed. We want this to support kind of those things above and beyond the academic day. And so we see it as an opportunity to also enhance school spirit, promote inclusivity, and ensure that every student has the opportunity to participate, whether they can afford the gear to do the activity, or they feel like they have to take up extra shifts at work somehow to kind of offset those costs, so all people can participate and really invest in future leaders. These extracurricular activities are important pathways for kids to build leadership skills, teamwork skills, and self-confidence too. And so those are kind of our key objectives. You know, we have highlighted this first potential project of lighting up the soccer field. We tried to look at accessing use of the kind of stadium atmosphere in the football field and the track, and the RSU felt like that wasn't a compatible use for field hockey, soccer, or Nordic. And so this, understanding that better about the field needs, we really felt like this was the approach we wanted to take. And we see it as kind of a critical community asset in terms of night access to activities. I just saw a video of Iceland, which is known for being this amazing place for youth and adolescents, and their mental health rates are amazing, surprisingly enough, who would have thought? And they light everything up, the playgrounds, the fields for kids to play in, because they know that it helps youth get out. And so this just highlights, we want to bring late afternoon and night practices and games to life. And it talks a little bit about the importance of that in terms of it being able to help the success of the programs, the access to more kids, the atmosphere for parents. And we have an initial goal based upon some early budgeting of what it's going to cost for fundraising. And, you know, in early conversations with Meredith, see this as a potential cost sharing with the schools to support this. And, you know, the last page here really speaks to how we would grow the boosters program over the long term. By becoming a club member, which is a new concept, attending boosters events that aren't just necessarily the traditional sporting event that we have historically charged people to attend, by selling more gear and Orono High School wear, engaging and having some corporate sponsorships, and allowing some targeting of donations to programs. And so we see there's an opportunity to be doing a lot more and engage a lot more people. And with that, we are working towards developing bylaws. We have a board for the boosters program, and we will be promptly applying for 501c3 incorporation in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I would think, to kind of help this along. In the interim, however, having recently been through this process, it takes about 6 months or potentially more for the IRS to give approval. And so we would hope that if donations were coming in that early period, that the schools could accept those on our behalf. So I think that's it.
Yeah, so the initial cost estimate for this project is well, in total, it's actually around 170,000. But we kind of selected a segment that's around 147 or 142. 142. So it would be 165 would be the total project. So included in that 142 would be lighting that field with 4 poles, 7 lights per pole. It would also incorporate some drainage and regrading work on the side of the field in between that field and the hockey rink, to make possible more bleachers on that side, because there's just not a lot of seating at that field. And it would also include some back nets for behind the goals, because the balls often get up into the landscape, especially on the Forest Avenue side. And then the last component of the project is something that we think the athletic budget can handle, so that's not included here, and that's just the adding of more bleachers, and that's something that can be done incrementally. So the first part of the project is the lights, the regrading and drainage, and the nets that are the 142,000. So the cost share that we're proposing is the booster group raising the 95,000, the school district committing 50,000, and being able to accomplish this project as soon as the funds can be raised. I think the goals of the timeline that you all are hoping for is to be able to have something ready for next year. So I think the success of fundraising efforts initially will give us an idea of, is that a realistic timeline or not? But I think, planning for it, if we're going to move forward with this in next year's budget, would be the timeline that would meet what this group's goals are for their fundraising. We've done these kinds of fundraising partnerships before, where we accept the money and put it in a dedicated account. We still have some of that money here that's lingered for years, and things like Larry's Run and a couple of others from years past. So it's not a problem to do this while Boosters is getting the 501c3. It's not unprecedented. You can certainly do that. I really think it's a great asset for the community. I don't think we emphasize the Nordic use of that field as much as I think is important to consider. Currently, we allow these, industrial lights and run these long cords to have a little bit of light out there for the Nordic course in the winter. So this can really be a nice asset for our Nordic team, but also the community around.
And there's a youth Nordic program that is on that field, and there's 100 Orono youth, like ASA Adams age kids that do that, and it's at night and it's dark.
and our municipal kit, I mean, all of it's really, and
Yeah.
then beyond, so. I see this as, a great opportunity for us to get a great asset, at minimal cost to the district. And we'll kind of set the stage for future projects to come that can help us accomplish some of our capital goals for the district. You don't have any questions? I'm gonna stop sharing so we can see Brian.
Especially third.
Yeah, questions.
I mean, yeah, I guess I would start by saying, thanks for like putting this together. We've been talking about ways to raise money for all the extracurricular. I see a lot of ways like.
It's hard to hear you. Can you talk?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
I
because
see
there's
a
a
lot-
loud thing back there.
I see a lot of ways that, having a nonprofit to raise money for a lot of extracurriculars can be really, really great for a lot of things. So I really appreciate that work. And as someone that's played a lot of on ultimate frisbee teams and under night lights, I appreciate the lights at night. I guess I also wonder, as somebody in high school through college, studied astronomy, I studied salmon, there's migrations, and I have a big worry about lights at night. They disrupt migration in salamanders, and you can't put your telescope on the field and then that's light at night. And so I guess the part of me that reacts strongly against big lights, and I understand the other part, sports at night too. So I guess my question is, have we considered the negative downside of reducing our dark skies and other things, and how are the lights managed? And those are the sorts of questions I have.
Yeah, and these aren't lights that we would anticipate having on every night, all night or anything. It's for select times and activities as needed. And I think the town's hockey rink is lit up every evening regardless. And then you've already have the football field. So there's an equity issue across sports if you're saying yes to one and no to another to consider in this. And so I would argue against that.
Yeah, I mean, I
As
think
an environmental person.
these aren't lights that will stay on 24/7, right? Like the parking lot lights do, or, the street lights. So, we've talked a little bit about how outside of, our scheduled times of use, how might community members be able to, if they want to come and ski and need some lights, how might that work? And, I think the hockey rink I think it can be turned on. Do they just automatically come on? I think you can turn them on and off, and I would.
Used to be able to.
Yeah, I would imagine these might work similarly, but we might have some posted hours, and that also will be something that we'll have to talk with the town about. There will be a process that we would have to go through with the town, with the site plan, adjustment, and I know that's something that, would be considered in terms of community impact of, neighbors and such. I'm not sure, in terms of as discreet about, migration patterns. I've never heard the town council consider those kinds of issues. But I think there are other lighting issues around that have way more impact than what this would have.
Sure. I think that, I think, so I just, having discussion about the timing, about the ways they're angled, all that stuff,
Yeah.
but I think.
Right, and angle, they really are going to be angled on the field to try to eliminate, the light being a distraction for neighbors.
No, and I
such.
don't mean to just. Those are my concerns.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to say thank you for the efforts. I've been around long enough to see this. This was tried probably 10 to 15 years ago. There was a group that tried to tap into alumni, do some fundraising and stuff like that. It kind of didn't go very far. So I'm really excited to see that someone's, picked this back up and is willing to try to do it. And I support you and thank you.
I would definitely echo those concerns. I can remember that previous effort too. There was a lot of enthusiasm around it and it ended up going nowhere at all. I don't think there was a nickel raised out of that. So if you can actually pull this off, and not only for this project, but have something, as you said, build and go forward, that would be great. So I would echo Jake's points of thanks. I do have a couple questions. One is, surrounding the estimate. Bill, is this something that you put together on the estimate?
Yeah, we're, I've got another, I think, 2 electrical companies coming in. One guy was actually, a graduate from here. And so there's possibilities there. I don't want to speak to it right now, so I'm not sure where it's gonna go yet, but yeah, I put it through one of the people who used one of them.
Okay, great, that's good. And then the second one regarding those bleachers, we actually have space over there, so I know the line between our property and the town's is tight on that side.
Yeah, Bill's,
So I actually met with the town today. Had Mitch Stone come up with Rob Yerkes, and Pat Eston. Kind of what we're giving them as a game plan is we're gonna stay 5 feet back. Kind of do what we did with the bleachers on the whole, on the away side for football, where we kind of backfilled it. And I had that conversation with them, so that's one of the reasons we got to go through the process. Take about 200 feet, backfill that, so it's nice. And the other piece we're gonna do also, Mark, is one of the concerns was drainage off the field. It's always been an issue. And part of the process with this is putting another drain tile in that little dead area, which is actually gonna solve both our problems. And so they were happy with that. They were exactly happy with that. Cleaning up the mess in the side, or the structure, they go all the bird off, and everything are. Clean that up, put a real structure in there, make it look really good. Yeah, they didn't seem to see the problem, they just, process we gotta go through with them. It's not that hard, it's just we gotta get the process in.
So where that mass area though, that's town, isn't it? Or is that on?
We're working, yeah, most of that's town land that we're dealing with, I found a stake up back, we go about 250 feet across the back, kind of where those telephone poles are,
Right.
like poles.
Right.
It's kind of where our line
That's
is,
what I thought.
and so by going to them, the town council might get involved, they're not sure yet. I do know we've got to go in front of the planning board, and because one of the problems, it's not really a problem. We know we're gonna back like that area, which for them, I don't think it's a big deal, but it's still, it's a thing that they have that we're not supposed to back like.
Right.
So, you know, I've made some offers to them too, because they've got the bolts that aren't good. So I see, you know, once we get this up, if we've got the space on the backside, if you'd like to put a light up,
yeah, for the hockey rink.
for the hockey rink, you know, whatever it takes. And so they were pretty good about it. We had a pretty good meeting today, so they're gonna reach out to their one person. Mitch is gonna get back to me, and then we'll start that process.
Okay, so I would just add, that's all great, I would just make sure that we, as I'm sure you're already doing this, make sure you document everything, given the current amount of turnover there. The possibility is
Absolutely.
more to come, especially in some areas that would be directly related to this. I want to make sure we have everything that's agreed to documented in case there's turnover and then someone wants to undo it.
You know, and Rob Yerkes said, it's exactly what Rob Yerkes said to me, and I know 100%. Once we get done, it'll be solid.
Okay, sounds good, thank you.
I mean, once it goes through the planning board, it's very hard to overturn. So that would be the key step, is to get things through the planning board. Yeah, I don't have anything to add. Go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, you can go first if you like, Ryan.
I was just going to say I would third or fourth or whatever it is to thank you. I think this is a fantastic effort. I think it's important to have the cost share agreed to up front, right? Because we've seen other efforts like building the stage at using the OMS stage, right? They raised, it was real money. It was $30,000 or $40,000, but it's still a small fraction of what was needed. And so I think just everybody having a clear understanding up front about how much is going to come from the different parties is important, but seems like that's worked out clearly, and it's at a level that I can support from the district. These things are in our capital plan, so it's really what the private fundraising is doing, is moving them forward. So I certainly support the notion that we can contribute part of the money towards that. I think it's a fair cost share, and I do think that's important to work out up front. But beyond that, I think it's great. I think both my boys played soccer. I'd love to see, I've spent a lot of hours sitting on the side of the soccer field. It definitely deserves an upgrade. And yeah, and as Mark said, if this not only gets through this, but launches a process that helps in the future, that's a big win too.
Yeah, I'd like to echo the thanks. I know this will take a lot of effort, especially for those of you that have got the ball rolling or may serve on the board. You're committing a lot of time to this process. I also have a soccer player. She's in 4th grade. This travel soccer, so we're likely to be going to middle school. I appreciate the expansive nature of your vision too, looking beyond just traditional athletics, the other extracurriculars and ways that you can support a variety of participants. I do think we could probably also just talk to the campus astronomy. I also am raising an astronomer with a telescope. And it's not too hard to engage community members in these conversations, whether it's people's backyards or just the way in which the types of bulbs that are chosen, or engaging campus folks. So I don't think it's an either which way, it's probably a couple of conversations to make sure that everyone gets the benefit from these things, soccer players, astronomers, and naturalists or whatnot. So just to keep that conversation open and yeah, so thanks for starting this and getting the ball rolling.
I could just, last piece I'll add, so, understanding that efforts like this have happened in the past, I'm going to choose to remain hopeful. So my wife still serves, even though we've been living here for a year and a half, on the board of what's called the Holton Alumni Association. That group currently has a current endowment of $3.2 billion and have spent $1.8 million in the last 15 years since the first inception of the group. I think their secret and most of that money is buying scholarships, buying curtains for the auditorium, and some small sneakers and shorts and things like that for students. It's all encompassing, and I think their key is making sure that it's not just for those that are currently here. It's not just if you have children that are involved. If you were once a part of this very private school district, you can give back in any small way whatsoever. Anything is appreciated. So some folks give in the forms of just annual gift. Others have given entire trusts of $700,000-800,000. So we'll see, I guess, where this project goes. But I've seen it in a much more impoverished community and benefited directly from it as principal at the high school in that community to see what that could do. And we're here. I plan to stay here, so we're thinking something similar that can work there can work here. So that's our vision. That's our goal. We've got a little bit of background with it. We'd be happy to work with people who got that off the ground there. Just figured they can pull it off, and we want to try it.
I'll just say, I fully support you in that, and I know I've got my comments that sound negative, but like I think what you're doing is wonderful, and like I've run several nonprofits. We haven't won any help with some of those aspects of things, but so thanks for doing.
Not take it negatively.
Yeah.
This might be silly, but how has the Boosters Club existed in the past? I just don't know how.
Sure, I can answer that. To the best of my knowledge, and maybe some people understand more. So the Boosters has kind of had this, it was a 501c3. It was, sort of over the long history of supporting school programs similar, but on a smaller scale of projects like this. And then over the course, I would say maybe the past 5, 6, 7 years, people moved on, kids, parents of kids who graduated, could stay involved. And the pandemic happened. And so my involvement, Julie Cartery and I's involvement was trying to keep sort of the Boosters as we knew it, which was really offering concessions at sporting events, and do scholarships and supports things on a small scale for the school, kind of keep that going. Recruited some new volunteers, had some new energy, which just happened to be extenders or people here involved in this group. And then got back sort of together to kind of formalize it, and Mike Archer's on, so he can speak to that, and really discovered that things had sort of fallen apart on the structural way of it being a nonprofit. So when this project is going on, and we and the Boosters were trying to figure out what to do in the long term, and some other sort of identified potential needs came along, it really seemed like it was a good marriage to sort of bring these things together to be sort of more than a one-off, and there is some history and structure with the Boosters, so it made sense to me to bring these two things together. Awesome, thank you. Yeah.
And Mike had the computer there froze, he's over at Old Town. Get this thing out, so, yeah, I mean, I think the structure that this group is, trying to bring back to boosters is really positive step forward for that group. But, Tim's experience with the alumni network in Holton is, if Holton can build that kind of, resource over 15 years, I mean, that we take the long view, I think that's the way that we want this to be built. There are some people who reached out to us through connections with the Orono Education Foundation who I think this is really what they're looking for, this kind of group to become involved with, to future, past alumni from way back and trying to find ways to plug into something like this. So I do think there are people out there aside from, like Sam mentioned, all the fundraising we do at our schools. We have a little bit of fundraising fatigue in our schools sometimes, but I think the vision is broader than that and, way broader than the Snack Shack. I feel like probably I need to bring maybe a formal recommendation to the next meeting now that we've had a chance to hear and we've had a chance to ask questions, just so we formalize the cost sharing agreement. As this effort gets off the ground. Does that sound like the next step we would take?
Absolutely. I think one other thing to think about too is especially given, the stated goal of having something in place for next fall, which would be is ambitious, but would be great. I think we'll need to think about what level of fundraising success we need to see before we could commit kind of district funds to that. And we want to see some level of success before actually pull the trigger on it. So it seems to me like a tight, it'd be great if we could have something in place for next fall, but we need to at least talk about that a little. So maybe give some thought to that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't, if we're just allocating 50,000, I mean, we would need to have just to do the light project. I mean, that's the bulk of this amount. So, I think we need to almost be there fundraising wise to begin the project. We can't really begin the project without that.
We're going to be budgeting for next year, and we'd have to make that decision in April, probably at the latest. We want to.
You could allocate it in your capital improvement reserve account instead of in your budget. That way, if it floats over fiscal years, it's not time bound to next year's fiscal budget.
That's probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what happened with the last effort that was trying to raise money for the football field, is we set aside, I want to say 80,000, and then, whatever $100 was raised, and eventually that 80,000 was used to replace the tennis courts, which were cracking apart. So, we can set it aside as a general capital improvement, and then depending on how the fundraising goes, we can use it as we see the priority queue.
You can tell that this district really needs a reset around these kind of fundraising efforts, because there's just all these, previous efforts that have fallen short, and that's why I don't think getting these.
Well, the good thing is there's more energy right here now than there was in the previous one, so that's good.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Next up, we have a $2,000 grant. It's anonymous, but you want to tell us what it was for? Yeah.
We have the calendar discussion next.
I'm sorry, what?
The calendar discussion?
Oh, you're right. Yep, I jumped ahead. Calendar discussion.
Don't you want to hear me object to early release date?
I'm looking forward to that. That time of year, Dan.
Yeah. So I'm happy to say that we've had a chance to take the calendar before the UTC group, and as it currently stands, we feel like we're in good standing with the 5-day requirement of no more than 5 dissimilar days. With our calendar as is and the other district calendars, there was, I think, maybe 1, maybe 2 more districts that she still needed calendars from, but she felt really confident that it was going to be okay, just knowing what she knows about historically how those districts have worked. So, this calendar we bring before you is kind of just a first read tonight, does work within the regional, UTC regions, calendar alignment needs. And just to kind of hit some highlights, it's very similar to this year's calendar. We line up our in-service days in October and March with the region. That helps us not have too many out of alignment days. Our January in-service day, we line up with the only other district in our region that does in-service day in January, so that the 2 of us are, you know, in sync with that out of alignment day. The discussion, we had a lot of discussion around where to place early releases, looked at, you know, whether we do them. We've talked at the board level. It's been several years that I've just reminded everyone in the last few years of discussions, we have tried to gather input from the community at different junctures about early releases, and I don't hear as much struggle with them, particularly from ASA families, which is where we had a lot of concern expressed, I don't know, 5 years ago, when they felt more random, like they were just kind of all over the place. And we've been putting them consistently, like in one space during a month, like, you know, the first Wednesday, whatever it is. And that seems to work well. What's also helped is the after school care that the town program has at ASA has really helped a gap that we had for people to be able to access childcare for that. So we put it on the second Tuesday. It's not perfect. There's really not second Wednesday. There's really not a perfect Wednesday to do it. And we've decided that Wednesday is better than Monday or Friday. It feels, I don't know, it just feels like you can get some rhythm in the week and then finish with some rhythm. That if you put it earlier or later in the week, it would just, maybe the timing of the week wouldn't feel as productive. And I think having it on a Monday or Friday is just a little concerning for us in terms of productivity with what we're trying to accomplish here with staff, especially Friday afternoons. So that we've had a lot of discussion around that. And the other place we had discussion was the December break that like New Year's falls on a Wednesday, and there was some discussion in the region about whether or not we would just push out the break 2 more days. But we all decided we really couldn't do that because of it pushes us really up against Juneteenth in June if we, you know, use all our days and then have a couple more, which just it's complicated. So we're trying not to do that. So everything else about the calendar, you know, is pretty straightforward as we've had it in place for a couple of years. So invite your questions or feedback.
So on the draft we have, there's,
Goes directly to her.
doesn't show this, I mean, but I am assuming that the first full day for all students will be the 29th.
Oh, yeah, that needs to be corrected on here.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Nobody is anybody else in the region starting after Labor Day, or everybody starting before?
There are a couple of districts that start after Labor Day, Bangor and Old Town, I think, and it's contractual with them.
I always find it odd to bring students in and staff to for a few days before Labor Day, and then. I mean, I'm gonna vote against this anyway, because I feel like these days on there, but if we wanted to do something that somebody else might support, like, was there any consideration given to starting after Labor Day?
We haven't given in consideration to that. It does push us into June further.
How does Bangor do it?
I don't think they have this, I think they have 1 or 2 less in-service days during the year. I don't think they have a January day, is what I think.
I dumped that, Jane.
And they put it though before school, I think.
contractually, they have one more day before school staff. Our staff feedback, we've had the start of school slightly different depending on the year. They feel like all around, for them and for kids, having a 3-day week and then a 4-day week and then a 5-day week helps build stamina for kids, especially, well, really at all ages, because, it's a big transition to come back after summer. And I think they find that really works well to transition back into a school year. On years when we haven't done that, where we started with a 5-day week, for example, it's, I hear from a lot of people, but that really is not as good as when we do it 3, 4, 5.
I'm good.
Anybody else have feedback or questions on the calendar?
I guess I have, I don't like the early release days on Wednesdays. I feel like it breaks the rhythm of the week, and it seems like doing it on a Friday afternoon, or just like, I feel like what a lot of other districts do, I know around here, but it just makes so much, makes so much more sense. And it is because teachers don't, or like we can't get teachers at those in-service days, that feels like a different problem. I don't know that putting it in the Wednesday is the right solution for that, but I don't really like those. And like, I also, it's like the same with this week, like this January back, it's the same thing like this, like, I feel, I'm more of like, let's do a lot of one thing, and then like feels like we're back, and then we're like off for a little bit, and then like this week is like so
Right.
silly.
Yeah,
It's like, what
early release with
are we
the
in school or
in-service
are we
day.
not in school? I don't know. And it's like, so I feel like that like starting later, like having a longer January break, I also don't even understand why we have a February break. I'm not from New England originally, but I would just get rid of the February break. That seems ridiculous.
It's a very New England thing.
And like make it longer summer or a longer December. And so what happens if we are out more than 5 days out of school? What is the
Well, ultimately, the Department of Education can come in with a big stick of some sort and say, you have to get an alignment. There are all kinds of statutes that, like, the question is, what would we do? What would happen if we didn't follow that? And I think we don't typically try to push the limits on following statutes. But, one of the challenges with having the right placement of the early release is trying to keep it consistent. When we try to keep it consistent, it's really hard to find the perfect place to put that, because of school vacation weeks, because of in-service days, because of holidays. And I take your point about Fridays. I think that is best for kids. I don't think an early release day in principle is about what's, best for kids. It's about what we're trying to accomplish with that time with staff. That's why we do early releases, right? And so it's more convenient, I think, for families on Friday afternoons. But I don't think it accomplishes the goals as effectively of the district's time to accomplish work.
And that's because there isn't the focus among the staff.
We haven't tried it, but I don't think there would be as much on a Friday afternoon.
I am less focused on a Friday afternoon.
I know like that, they do that down our harbor, some other places. But
Yeah, no one around it. Early releases around here aren't done that way that I've seen.
like in other districts, they have like down Massachusetts. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's maybe something more wrong. But another way to fix that problem of time. It feels like a solution that's sort of not sort of like a stick instead of a carrot, or something that doesn't feel right about that solution to that problem. Like, and I feel like we should be serving
I'm not sure I have the solution.
the kids and find a way to make it work. But so yeah.
I think it's important to just step back and think about why we have PD days and early release, which is, those of us who teach at a university have a similar experience, except we only teach, some quarter of a week or something like that of actual class FaceTime. These teachers are in class most of the day, most of the workday, and you know, they do various degrees of grading outside of the workday, and they have a planning period, but you can't function as an institution without having time for talking, building common vision, training, all of the DEI work we've been doing, all the work that's going to come out of the strategic plan. This is a really important piece of being a healthy organization and having teachers who are current, on top of methods, working together with each other and collaboratively. So I just think it's really important that we recognize the core purpose of these things, and that it's not like an office job where you can call a meeting and, you know, 90% of the people can make it. If we don't set these times aside, you can't get teachers in the same room together. And it's a really important function. And, you know, especially in a district that has such high goals for the level of training our teachers have, and of new initiatives around DEI and new initiatives around whatever might come out of the strategic plan around outdoor learning or whatever else it might be. This is how these things all get implemented. So I really kind of second Meredith that this needs to be a staff focused time. It is a staff focused time. Nobody would choose to do this if it wasn't. We're not doing this for kids or families. We know it's a bit of a burden on kids and families. We're doing it because the staff needs it.
As part of kids and families, I actually prefer it on Wednesdays. I know I don't really have to say here, but I enjoy it on Wednesdays. If it was moved to a Friday, personally, that would be a bad week. Because usually on half days, it is school half day, which is usually lunch and then crashing at my friend's house, and then rehearsal or practice. Because a lot of the teachers are also coaches, so that doesn't happen at noon. It happens at 3 or 4 at regularly scheduled time. And if it was on a Friday, I would be so tempted to just go home. And the idea of just going home and starting my weekend as a person who would have to come back, and I live 45 minutes away, so it would be like oh, maybe I can just go home for lunch. Oh no, I'm gonna be late for rehearsal. Maybe I should just stay here. Like it's a little bit too tempting personally. And I know that I have friends who share the sentiment of if it was Friday, it would be, oh, let's go to the dog. Let's never go back to school. This is great. I like them on Wednesdays. It doesn't interrupt my week too bad. And usually my teachers are expecting it.
There was a time when this district had an early release every Wednesday.
I remember that.
me
I was
too.
at ISA.
Oh my goodness.
The guy at the family dog was very irritated with us. We'd show up every Wednesday, he'd go again.
So, yeah, you know, having these is important to accomplish the work, and I don't think that was the concern I was hearing from you. No, I think it was placement, but maybe it was also early release. I don't have the perfect solution for placement, and this is, you know, I think the best that I can come up with that mitigates the drawbacks.
And again, we do half days because it counts for a full day.
Right, if we did more full days, we would have to also pay people for more days of work. And we would be further out of alignment with our district, with our region, unless we put them all at the beginning or end of the school year.
If we put them in the summer, we wouldn't be further out.
Right, beginning or end,
We'd have to pay them, but we wouldn't be out.
right.
And
But, you know, we find that front loading or back loading days really is not as useful than having them throughout the year when, you know, you're able to do some work and then sit with it and then keep going with it, is useful.
I would agree on the back load, but on the front load, you could also make the argument that you could actually accomplish more if you had a one dedicated 8-hour day than 4 2-hour days chunked up over the course of 4 months, right? I mean, I can totally see the argument against backloading. By the time we get to June, you're not gonna get any out of that, not here. The front loading argument, I don't know if I'm necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you're trying to do. So I think there's.
My concern with this has always been, in addition to the disruption to families, which I don't like. And I've never liked that, even though now my kids are older. When I had younger kids, I found that rather than disruptive, and I've got a job that's pretty flexible, and it always ended up being a problem. So I still sympathize with that, but my big concern with the half day release days is how much is actually getting accomplished. By the time teachers get rid of students and do whatever else they need to do, and then go to this professional development activity for 2 hours.
2 hours.
I'm sorry, but I don't know what's getting done. So that's always been my concern.
We have, Susan's done a great job of detailing out over the course of the year, all the things that we're, accomplishing using all of our time, whether it's in-service day time or early release time. And it's an important, without early release days, we would not be getting the work done that we're getting done. And she shared that with you before.
I think that the point though is that, yeah, but if we put all that time into like a week at the beginning, like intensive, like that could, we have more energy and more productivity and more capacity to plan a year when you're not right now. Like the last 2 hours.
I've made this argument for years, so I'm just kind of reiterating it, because it does irritate me every time.
I've been in districts that front loaded a lot of professional development. There were like 4 straight days of in-service, and people get to hear pretty quickly. So I'm not sure I don't always agree. It depends on what the task is to me as to whether chunking it together is better than having smaller chunks. And we try to be thoughtful about that and what we choose to do with in-service days versus early release days, and doing things on early release days that you can make some meaningful progress in a couple of hours. And often we find we chunk in-service days and not the same thing for, the full day, because people need, change of state to sometimes be most productive. So, I think the combination of days works well. Moving early release days to an in-service day requires, more pay, more salary, increased budget. So.
I guess I have a couple of questions. I guess the January week, you think that, like, I guess, what are your thoughts on that? Like having, I feel like they're coming back for 2 days after holiday. Back to the sort of like.
I'm having trouble hearing.
The like those 2 days that we come back after like Christmas break and then holiday, and like about making that more good, consistent, like. Is that something that you're concerned about too? Like not just having a 2-day week after a holiday, like that.
I think it also goes along to the ramping up like we do with summer too.
Yeah, I'm not concerned that those days will be productive or won't be productive. I feel like.
You have to give through New Year's, and then there's the downside to just adding 2 more holiday days. Aside from the ramp up, which Jake already mentioned, and I do think the ramp up is real, is number one, that pushes us 2 days further in the summer, which we always hear about right. It's easy to not worry about the summer right now, but we always hear about it when we get close to the summer. And there's a real concern about students for whom school is providing not just education, but nutrition in particular, and other medical services and social services, mental health services, stretching that out for 2 whole weeks. At that point, it's 14 straight days of the day I don't see a trusted adult, if they have a situation in their house where they're not able to have a trusted adult, or if they have a situation in their house where they're just not able to get food. That's a really long time for kids to go out of our watch. So there's some real issues with pushing that, much as I would like to have it, pushing that vacation out for 2 whole weeks causes a number of issues.
Why is that not the same, like, if you made the summer longer? I mean, it's not like we're watching them all summer,
But we have summer school and nutrition programs in the summer.
And not to mention our regional alignment, right? So that's another part of the metric that we really can't just do whatever we want with our count.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I always see like those 2 days as maybe in service day potentially is something. I mean, it seems like those are days that a lot of, at least among the ASA family, there's a lot of that are still on break and not back for those 2 days. That's not generally true.
I mean, we set the school calendar and people can see it far enough advance to make plans, and
Yeah.
if you want to have your children out of school, that's your choice to do that. But, you know, I think we talked about whether or not we wanted to move the January in-service date that week. That was, not felt that it would be as effective a day. It might have higher absentee rates of staff. And it didn't get us to the weekend. There was still another, day there. And we talked through what that might look like in the end. It didn't align with the region to do anything other than what we had put forward anyway.
Are we ready to move on for tonight? This is not a vote. This is just a discussion. Any other issues that haven't been aired?
Nothing to do with the schedule, but why is the 7th a T?
I don't know, say again.
The 7th of January is a T, I think, or my glasses are
I
bad.
think your glasses are.
I'm just leaning back here and I'm like, is it a T?
There could be mistakes on here.
I was so confused.
It's a 7.
I mean,
Thank you
one
very
of the issues around early releases is placement, and I guess the question is, does the board want us to continue to try to have consistent placement of early releases?
Consistency better than notice.
Because we can be strategic about not bumping them up against weeks that aren't good to have them if we're not trying to be consistent. And that's what I mean, like, it don't mean like putting them on a Tuesday this month and a Thursday next month and a Monday the next month, and then like, this month it looks like the first Wednesday would be better than the second Wednesday.
I think having consistency makes it easier for people to plan. So if we're gonna have them, which I wish we didn't, but if we are, having it the second Wednesday of every month is better than, having it the first Wednesday or the third or the fourth, next Friday this week. That just makes it even worse than it's already bad. So I'm bad. So as long as we're gonna have them.
Yeah, there's just
Yeah,
two.
I've heard way less complaints since we moved to a consistent day. I mean, part of that's the rec program, but I think part of it is just the consistency. People don't always, I mean, the second Wednesday can still sneak up on somebody, but at least they feel like that's partly on them. If it does, it's a nice consistent pattern.
I am trained, so I do think this calendar, there's probably lots of solutions that would result in different complaints. I have different feelings about it now being staff than when I was faculty. But I do appreciate the consistency. I do know that when February comes, I need to count one Wednesday and then remind myself and my wife that the next Wednesday is early release. And I do remember when they weren't, and I was much angrier. So out of the dissatisfaction, I do at least know the second Wednesday of every month. I need to be ready. So there is that. That was second Mark's observation.
I have one question. So the rad camp, that's not ours at all. But yeah, I guess I just, there have been some issues with that amongst folks, like things that haven't gone well with children on that program. And I guess.
Yeah, the town's program.
Yeah, so I don't know. So I guess that's not.
Take it up with your town council.
Okay, but like, so I mean, but if there were ways that we could support that or do something, that's not.
Parks and Rec.
Yeah. But if that's our solution to our problem,
Oh, sure.
then maybe we want to do that.
But I just think it's one thing that's helped families be able to, figure out care. Not just on early releases, but in general.
So that was helpful. That first year or two, I think when they ran the program, they did not cover early releases, and that was hilarious.
Yeah.
And I'm not like that.
So I'm just going to remind people, we still have a couple of pretty hefty agenda items. So we can stay here if we want to, but is there anything specific we need to address? Okay. Moving on. Next up, we have the co-curriculars. There is we have co-curriculars.
Yeah.
Yeah, do
They're
you
there.
want us to
Yep.
read it?
Nope, I got it now. I would make a motion to approve the co-curriculars as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Just very quickly for the record, Yellow Tulip Advisor, trial year 1, Billy Joe Bowden. Drama spring play at the high school, Tina Burns, drama spring play tech director, Scout Howe. Middle school Nordic ski assistant, Emily Hildebrand, middle school softball, B team, Ellie Pierce, unified middle school basketball, trial year 1, half appointment Steve Van Dolman, half appointment Chad Kirkpatrick, assistant varsity indoor track, Aaron Muser. Any questions? All right, we'll go ahead and vote. Jake?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Mark? No, sorry, Noah. Mark?
Aye.
Okay, and I also vote aye. Carries 5-0. Next up, we have a donation. What's that for, Meredith?
Yeah, it's for general fundraising the middle school does. They solicit fundraising or donations for augmenting school activities. And this was sent in for that.
Okay, I would make a motion to approve the acceptance of a $2,000 anonymous donation to the middle school. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Thank you to the anonymous person.
Yes.
Yes. We'll go ahead and vote. Jake?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Noah?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Motion carries 5-0. Next up is a motion. I would make a motion to move the March 26th board meeting to March 19th, same time and place. Is there a second?
Second.
You want to remind us what that's about, Meredith?
Yes, I have a conflict on the 26th. And that's a really pretty important time period for budget planning. And so we talked last meeting about changing it to that date. Just looking at where meetings are around that.
I won't be here.
I'm sorry?
I will not be here.
Okay.
I cannot, I can do the 26th, but not the 10th. Or whatever.
So, I mean, you guys can have the 26th without me.
I don't think it'd be a good idea to have.
No, either do I.
That point in the budget discussion about it.
Yeah,
I
not
mean-
with budgets. Other ones we can, but not budget.
It's not a meeting where, I mean, we talk about budget every meeting along the way. It's not the biggest budget meeting, right? The biggest budget meetings are probably the first ones we have, the first couple we have, which are over by then, and the last couple that we had. And that's the time period where we're just kind of adding new information as it's coming known. So.
Brian, are you gonna be in Germany then? You'll be back.
No, not in March.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, yeah, I mean, you can do it without me, or, I mean, I can do either day, either side of those days if you want me there, but like, I have a talk down.
Yeah, I'll be away that whole week, so.
So.
No,
whatever.
are you saying the 18th or the 20th would work for you?
Yeah, those would work.
Oh, the 18th or the 20th, I'm sorry, I thought you were saying the
Yeah.
25th
No, I just have a
or 6th.
event I have to go to. That night.
I can do either of those nights.
Same.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we have other meetings happening either of those nights, so
I
I can do it either.
can do either of those.
I mean, we do have the accreditation visit happening, actually all 3 of those days, so. Is Meredith on the call? Is there any
Yes.
reason, is there anything at night happening during the accreditation visit that we would need to be aware of?
No,
Okay,
Are there events, is the March, like,
yeah, I'm looking at the calendar, I'm not seeing anything that's a big conflict those nights.
And there might be spring sports by then, but
Yeah, it's just some practices.
Right.
Show choir practice,
either of those is fine.
baseball, softball practice. Okay,
Jake, do those both work for you?
Yeah, that's fine. I would have spoke up otherwise.
Okay. People have a preference, Monday or Wednesday?
No preference for me.
Noah says Wednesday under his breath.
Wednesday?
I-
I mean,
they don't-
I don't think anyone else
I
has a
agree with
preference.
Wednesday. Wednesday probably easier.
March 27th.
March 20th.
Oh,
Right,
okay.
so I would drop the motion and make a motion to change the board date to March 20th instead of March 26th. Is there a second for that?
Yes, second.
Okay, any further discussion? We'll go ahead and vote then. Jake,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Noah,
aye.
Mark,
Aye.
I also vote aye, so that carries. We've changed that date.
Perfect.
Okay, next up, we have, it's under policies. It's not really a policy. This is it's a guideline. Someday we may have a policy, but I think I've shared with the board before. Meredith went to Drummond and Woodson the day before and got a big talk about how generative AI was changing the world, and it was a great time-saving tool, and it was something we really need to train our students in. And Susan and I went to a session the next day or the day after that from Drummond and Woodson, and it was all the legal pitfalls of generative AI, ranging from copyrights to FERPA violations to discrimination. And so I think we'd all been just kind of waiting for the dust to settle and not being the ones to figure it out. But I think you put those two things together and it really felt time to take a position. It is kind of, we are leading on this. I have not been able to find an actual policy from another district. I think New York City might have had something not as general as this, but so we're leading, but that's good. It's nice for RSU 26 to lead on these things. This has been vetted pretty thoroughly. It's been through the admin team multiple times. It's been through the curriculum committee, incorporated feedback from the teachers. It's been through the policy committee, significant feedback from the policy committee incorporated. We recognize this is a moving target. This is going to change probably in 3 or 5 months. But we just felt, and as you heard, I forget it's PD day or the early release day. I think it's early release day is going to be on generative AI, right? So it's coming up this week already in the classroom, and the teachers are kind of getting interested in it. So it's time. Meredith and I talked. It's going to be a first read. It's not a policy, so we don't technically have to have 2 reads, but felt like that it's a pretty big document and it's a pretty big step forward for the district. So we felt like it'd be good to have a first read and a second read. So we're just going to recognize a first read tonight. We can have some feedback from the board. Hopefully this is a case where I hope you had a chance to do your homework and read in advance, because reading it real time now is going to be hard. But that's kind of the context and background. So I would make a motion to recognize a first read of the guidelines on generative AI. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any thoughts or feedback? Definitely trying to find that middle road, not just banning it and not just saying Wild West, do whatever you want. It's trying to actually be proactive and say, here's ways that are beneficial to students as job training skills and getting more feedback. Here's ways that are dangerous, and we're going to hold teachers trained and responsible for avoiding those pitfalls. But it's trying to find a middle road, but it's still leaving a lot of latitude for experimentation as well. Noah?
Yeah, I guess so I'm just wondering about the piece on feedback from teachers to students using AI to evaluate student work is the part I was sort of like trying to understand the cause that's like 0.11, but then like later on, like you're not, yeah, so. Maybe,
So we've done some work on that. 0.11 is no longer allowing evaluation of students. It's increasing feedback and producing learning materials, which is maybe a subtle distinction, but I think it's an important distinction.
yeah, I guess I don't fully get, I mean, so AI is allowed to read student work and give feedback to the teacher who can then create feedback for the student, or?
It's you know, think of a writing assignment where you're doing 3 drafts, right? An early draft, a teacher could ask the student to use it themselves and then to incorporate the feedback, or the teacher could use it to just give some baseline feedback about, you know, you have grammar, these are some grammar errors. You have, you didn't follow the writing prompt because you didn't do the contrast, you did the compare, but not the contrasts, some of that kind of feedback. But any actual final grade and final evaluation would still be done by the teacher without the computer. And, you know, in the
Yeah, good.
the context, this was discussed quite a lot. And you know, this you jumped right to probably the most controversial part of this, but I think the context was was that we would like to see more writing, and more writing requires, and effective learning of writing requires more feedback. And there is a tool out there that's reasonably effective at student feedback, and it's a tool that they're going to use their entire careers. I mean, I imagine a lot of college students are already using ChatGPT to get feedback on their writing. So, you know, opinions are going to differ, but that's the balance that was come to across all the groups that have looked at it, is to really kind of walk that line. And it can be used for feedback, and it can be used to create rubrics or worksheets or something, but it cannot be used for anything that's actually a grade or the evaluation that goes into a grade. So every paper is going to get a final read that's 100% by a teacher.
Okay,
But the first draft might go through ChatGPT to find grammar errors.
I guess, yeah, that was my sort of question. It's like the teacher will be ultimately reading the work, not just ChatGPT reading.
There's no scenario under these guidelines where a paper only goes through ChatGPT and does not have a time where it's 100% on the teacher.
Is there a way for students to opt out of any AI having contact with their work?
There is not currently. There is disclosure, so a student would know, but there's a lot of protection of FERPA. So it might know it was a student's work, but it would never know whose student's work it was. Is there a further reason I'm missing why you would want to opt out?
I do not like AI as a person who does art specifically.
Yeah.
As a person who writes creatively, a lot of generative AI functions are based on stolen work. And I would hate a student's work or a student's voice to accidentally be co-opted by an AI generative source. And I know that I have friends who are uncomfortable with it and things like that, where it's sometimes not something that you want to come in contact with your work.
Yeah.
That's just personally.
I completely agree. And I think that I know several in the creative writing artists and folks who will not get let touch their work, both because of the copyright pieces, but also because they infringement on your personal, you write some personal essay, you don't want Microsoft getting all up in your business, right? Like that's not okay. So, yeah.
Can you be more precise what getting all up in your business means?
Like, well, reading if you write an essay, you write something artistic, something personal that's about yourself, and if it's then shared with something that goes to the entire world, like it's just allowed to use by GPT, Google, or whatever, it's suddenly your personal details that you like shared in a personal essay with your teacher is now part of the universe and used to create money for Microsoft and maybe spit back out somewhere down the line where they've shared your details in the story. Like, that's horrible. And like, I think that, yeah, that's a real.
And I think in the sense of AI becoming smarter and it becoming harder to detect the difference between a student's work and an AI generated piece when providing an AI learning center with student work, it will learn more efficiently how to replicate student work, which I know might not be a huge concern right now because I've read ChatGPT's essays. They are nothing like students' essays. But it's, I think, just personally, I wouldn't want some of my work in contact with AI. An essay that I do purely based on facts for a AP Lit course, I wouldn't mind, but something in a poetry course or a creative writing course, I wouldn't prefer it going through a function like that. Just because of how I know those programs are built.
But I think that the idea that we would write anything at this point that doesn't have contact with AI would mean that we would have to be writing on a paper with the pencil. Because the reality is Google Docs uses AI to correct your grammar and suggest the end of sentences. Anybody who uses Grammarly is using AI to, have a more, correct prose. I think that, we're talking about a different place on the spectrum now. But the territory that we're in when we talk about AI is not brand new, right? It's something that is part of the world that we're living in and learning in every day.
Well, but generative AI is fundamentally different than that, though. I mean, that's like comparing apples to oranges. That's not really a fair comparison.
Well, I said that because there was a reference at the beginning of the conversation to, using AI to check your grammar, on a first draft, which in some ways is something that, an engine like Grammarly is already doing.
But a generative AI program, whatever it is, you can use it for that, but there's no way to stop it from doing just that, right? Once it gets fed into a generative AI process, you're not just using it for grammar. That might be all you're using it for, but that's not all it's using it for. So really comparing it to something like the grammar suggestions in Google Docs or Grammarly, it really isn't the same thing. It's not a matter of difference of degree, it's a difference of kind at that.
I like the idea from a data governance point of view of students having the right to opt out. If we're in a position where faculty need AI to efficiently evaluate work, even if it's not for grading, then students should be able to use AI to, effectively submit work. And then we'll end up in a delightful circle where students create work from AI and it's evaluated on AI. So maybe there's the question of how much is being assigned. I like the idea of students having the right to opt out. And there are large lawsuits right now about copyright and AI, so it's a timely issue that's been brought up.
All right.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I think about how do you reconcile that with some of the things that I think are really powerful around giving students experiences with knowing how to effectively use it as a, in all kinds of ways to prepare them for whatever lies ahead, right? For, either their schooling or their vocation in life. But, we're just at the tip of the iceberg with learning about it. And I think having a healthy dose of caution is important. So I guess I'm trying to figure out how to build that.
Yeah, I mean, I think
build that in, like in the same way, if I can finish, like in the same way that, some rarely, but sometimes it happens where families say, I don't want my child to use a computer at home. So there have to be accommodations made for alternate assignments in that case. And I guess that's a parallel in my mind that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think we should respect those things. I think that the worry about not coming into contact with it, I mean, I think we're not saying that you're not going to use it in all sorts of other ways, but there are I can imagine some essays about tragedies in my life that I want to share with my teacher as a creative writing thing that I don't want to go further than this one, what I mean? And having the capacity to opt out in certain circumstances or in some way to be look, this thing and I understand maybe it, what adds a little more work, the teacher has to read it instead of letting someone else read, it, but like, maybe not like a broad, like no AI in all circumstances, but like, you know.
And personally, for me, having control over where my work is going. If I know for certain that my work is going from my computer to Miss York's computer and that's where it ends. And if she wants it to go further than that, she has to check in with me. If it goes from my computer to a generative AI, and as far as that AI is supposed to go, is just in that computer and just in that space. From what I understand about AI, which I will admit is limited at best, it won't stay in that space. Either my sentence structure or the words that I use, if the byline that is typed in is assess this senior girl student's essay on topic. That will go in.
But it's not
and-
gonna. It's not gonna
No.
have any of that information you just said. It's just gonna say assess this 12th grader's essay, but and it's, I mean, and what it's not like there's gonna be a copy of it laying around. There's gonna be an incremental change to a couple of, parameters in the neural net. I do understand the use case about writing deeply personal essays and wanting to have control over that. Can you help me understand why going in Google Docs or Google Gmail is different from going to ChatGPT? Because those are also being read by a computer and probably being stored for the rest of your life.
For me personally, because as far as I'm aware, Google is not using what I have written to become better at the other end of it. Is ChatGPT isn't only the function of ChatGPT isn't just writing or assessing this essay, it's also helping write an essay somewhere else. We're using what I have done as assess a 12th grade essay. If someone in the school types in, write a 12th grade essay, it can now use all of the information that it's been given in my essay to make it seem more realistic in that situation, which I feel is not right. And then also all of what I have put into that is now no longer mine. I no longer have control of it as soon as it enters the generative AI.
Well, the fundamental difference is if it's not your Gmail and your Google Docs, at least from what Google tells us, is not being fed into machine learning, whereas anything you put into ChatGPT is being fed into machine learning. So that is a fundamental difference. Now, maybe Google's lying to us about Gmail and Google Docs, and I don't know, but at least from what they tell us, they store it, they have it, it's out there, but it's not being fed into a machine learning process. Whereas ChatGPT, anything that goes in there is being used to train ChatGPT to become better AI.
And like the Gmail, like my understanding is that if I delete my email, like it's gone from this planet. Like I own it. And I know.
That's not true. No,
They're not. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're selling it to all sorts of people. I get that.
And it's very much like the desensitization.
But yeah, I guess there's maybe we don't understand the technology.
Yeah,
and that may be part of the career, but I think that's important from a perspective right now is that it makes some of us really uncomfortable and perhaps there are a number of reasons, and I think it's worth respecting that at this stage, given the.
The question that I have is how this would be different than plagiarism checking software that is used.
Well, again, that's used, well, that's not fed into AI algorithm that's used, I mean, like,
It's
that's getting dicey. Because
Yeah.
there are some that are doing that, right? I mean, there's actually a fair amount of discussion going on.
I'm fundamentally against plagiarism software anyway, so.
But I'm fundamentally against plagiarism, I'm not.
Like, and there's of course famous examples recently of people, people that are authors who have been, AI will write things in their voice without having given them permission to write. Right? So clearly, like, they can hone in on individuals in some sense, and who knows how much it's right.
Well, they're not, I mean, they're not gonna have a handle, right? When I've done this, I've asked ChatGPT to write like Chaucer, I've asked it to write like Shakespeare, and I've asked it to write like Stephen King, and it does a pretty good job of all of those, but it's receiving text with those names attached to it. That's not going to be happening here. I'm not, I mean, I'm definitely hearing this. I'm not diminishing the case, and it is true that 3 to 5 page essay or whatever it is going into the corpus, but it's going into a corpus on top of 300,000 books. And that's a whole nother issue, right? The courts are going to be settling whether that was legal or not. 300,000 books and hundreds of newspapers and a bunch of other, right? It's, I don't know if it's a millionth, a billionth of that corpus, right? So in a binary sense, yes, it is using what you're contributing to that system, but it's also probably important not to over imagine the degree to which it's spying on you and figuring out, oh, this is a person who lives in Orono who plays field hockey, and so it's probably one of these two people, and I'm going to follow that, right? There, it's adding a sliver to a corpus, which it's I understand it's legit to maybe not want to even do that in an absolute sense, but it's probably important not to exaggerate what's happening either.
So yeah, I mean, maybe, and maybe we're just paranoid, but maybe there's a part that just doesn't want to participate in it. But I guess my question is like, so what? Okay, what's wrong with having like an opt-out? Why is it a difficult thing to include? I mean, if the students don't want the teacher doing that, like I don't see why not.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I mean, this is why we have 2 reads. I'm just trying to probe the use cases and understand it so we can craft a guideline that's actually effective to the need without being excessive, right? And, and the flip side, which is the conversation we're not having here, is, and this is something that I think some of the administrators have been exposed to that you may or may not have been exposed to, is this is already a job skill, getting people hired, and people who don't have the skill are not getting hired, right? So, then we come to this whole conversation, which we seem to have a lot with this board, about privilege. And, some of our kids may not, may have other channels to learn this job skill, or it may not be the job skill that pushes them over, but there are going to be other kids where this is a really important job skill when they go out on the job market. For everything from paralegals to, my sister is in PR, they've been writing their press releases with ChatGPT for a year now. So there are a lot of senses in which the education system is just way behind what's happening in most of the rest of the world.
And
so that's the flip side. Go ahead, Jake.
No, what I was going to say is there's a lot of things that we may not agree with, but the reality of the situation is it exists after our students get out of here. Like, another kind of similar topic we talk about is the use of computers in the classroom, right? Like, we may not like it, but the reality is the use of computers in the job is predominant when they leave here. So our job is to best prepare students for life after this. So I'm kind of torn with it because
I would agree with that, but at the same time, preventing teachers from using generative AI to offer feedback and or offering students the opportunity to opt out of having their work submitted to generative AI doesn't prevent the use at all or training of kids in using generative AI. It just prevents, really what that would do would be prevent a teacher use, not a student use, right? So, I certainly agree with the point you're making, but doing what...
Well, but what about a class assignment to feed your essay into ChatGPT to get a first round of feedback?
Why not make it optional? I was going to actually bring up that point, Brian. You'd mentioned this before. If students were shown how to use ChatGPT as an assistant, then they could then opt in to use it. And if you didn't want to, you could go to the writing center that's been established in the high school. You could work with your peers. You could go to office hours. And there are, as Mark is saying, there are certainly ways in which you could, teach folks how to use generative AI effectively without submitting personal creative works. So I think it's a both and situation potentially here to build those job skills while respecting some of the moral stances or concerns or creative content of student work.
You're also creating it as a necessary job skill for students who wish to go into education. If you're adding it as something like that, the sort of round and round way of we need students to learn this because we need students to learn this. We need teachers to learn it for students to learn it, to teachers to learn it again and again. And I understand that it's a huge part. Sorry,
go ahead. I interrupted you.
I understand it's a huge part of the world. Is there an education piece that's going along with these guidelines of like including it in a technology class or in the tech class Ms. J teaches or something like that to be like, this is what AI is, this is how it's built. Just to calm someone, an anxious teenager like me in middle school being like, you want a what to my essay?
Well, I don't think there's not a class where we can put this that's effectively going to reach all people in the right time. I think it'll have to be a lot of teachers teaching students about this. As teachers themselves are dipping their toes in and trying to learn at the same time. So, I mean, we anticipate that these guidelines will change many times as we learn more, because again, this is so emergent that there really aren't models out there, and we come up with a model because, as Brian said, it's either, right now, ban it or Wild Wild West. And so trying to figure out something in between is really hard.
I mean, just if I can summarize the conversation, what I'm walking away at the moment thinking, not that we're done, but if I were to walk away at this moment, we need to add a clause that has a per student, per assignment, opt-out choice. Right? Students.
Can I ask a question about that, Brian?
Yeah.
Because, as a former teacher of writing, entering student writing into the internet was a way for me to gauge whether or not students had done their own work. And, different teachers have, different tools for doing this, but I think that it all comes down to submitting student work to see if it has been previously published elsewhere. And I am afraid of telling teachers that they can't continue to use tools that are intended to help them understand if students are doing their own work.
What tools are currently being used at the high school, Meredith, do you know?
I don't know precisely. I would venture that there's a variety. I mean, turnitin.com is one that is frequently used. My tool of choice was just Google, pull a paragraph and enter the paragraph into Google, which, Google does remember the things that I put in there, and it does, use that information to, shape my search results in the future. And so I guess I'm wondering where the line is.
But the Google search engine, to my understanding, does not feed it then into a generative AI process. And I don't believe that Turnitin does either. Safe Assign currently. And I don't believe Safe Assign does either. So I don't think any of those, those are the three most common methods. And I actually spent a fair amount of time on this at the end of last semester, because I had a capstone essay submitted that I was 95% sure was plagiarized, and I couldn't find it anywhere. Through the variety of tools that I had used over the years, I actually met with someone on campus who knows a lot more about this stuff than I do, and we spent a couple of days trying to figure it out. And we couldn't place it anywhere. But none of the tools that we used, as far as he knew, and he knows a lot about more of this stuff than I do, and so as far as he knew, or as far as I knew, none of the tools we used were generative AI. They weren't fed into machine learning. So I get your concern, but I don't think that any of the tools that are commonly used for this at the moment would be taken out of commission by this process. And it would probably be a good thing to craft the language that Brian is suggesting, to say that a student opting out does not allow them to opt out of their work being submitted to any non-generative AI accepted plagiarism tracking tool or whatever. So you'd have to play with the language. But I don't think that it would take out any of the commonly used tools, at least at this point, unless I don't understand something.
No, I agree. This is specific to generative AI, which is a specific subcategory of AI. So does not apply to search engines, does not apply to plagiarism software, does not apply to Grammarly. It does apply to Bard and ChatGPT and Bing and Dolly,
Yes.
but
I guess my only other sort of concern is just this idea of the student, of any work being evaluated by ChatGPT or whatever. And giving that to teachers as a first pass, like the sort of biases and influences that can cause in a certain like direction. I don't know. I mean, there's nothing we're gonna do to solve it, but the dumbing down of language and the ways that these chatbots drive us in a particular direction has it concerns me. You know.
we're not in a position to stop that. Right?
Yeah, I suppose, and I guess it's just like so that
It's common. As much as you may hate, I may hate ChatGPT, it's already here. Like I said, it's already in most workplaces.
well again,
And
I'm not, again, I completely think we should be teaching students how to use it, and like, obviously that's the future, we should be like teaching. I guess it's the concern of how it influences the teacher's perception of the student.
Right, and it can be super useful, right? There was a story today, I don't know where I read it, I don't know if it was in the New York Times or Washington Post or somewhere else, but these engineers and scientists were using it to try and search for a more efficient, less environmentally harmful battery than lithium batteries. And what they did is they pulled, I mean, I'm not a science person, but they pulled the periodic table and used generative AI to run elemental combinations in such a way that allowed them to accomplish in a matter of hours something that would have taken years. And they've already come up with some promising combinations. They built a prototype of one. Awesome, like all awesome, right? So I don't think anybody here, well, certainly not me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm certainly not taking the position that, oh, generative AI is scary, you need to stay away from it. It is kind of scary, but I don't think we need to stay away from it. I think we just need to be super careful with how we engage it, right? And so I think the student opt-out, or I think that's an important piece to figure out. And Brian, you know this, and Meredith knows it as well, because I've voiced this during policy subcommittee quite a few times. My biggest concern, remains somewhat along the lines of some of the things Noah's getting at. I mean, I don't say that I'm opposed to all of 11G, but I'm probably opposed to most of it. And I'm definitely opposed to G2 and G3. For me, those are no go on the policy. I mean, I would maybe go along with 11G1, although I think you can do that without generative AI. Same thing with 11G4, although again, I think you can do that without generative AI, but 11G2 and 3 for me are just, no, I'm not going there.
I mean, I think it's terrifying, but I use it every day to like write code and write things and have generate ideas for titles, and so it's useful. But I agree, those things are the things that work.
I guess, it's hard for me to reconcile, it can do all these great things, but absolutely not ever this should it be doing. It just doesn't reconcile for me, like if we're, taking steps to protect, non-disclosure and FERPA. And, if we incorporate an opt-out, I think that's a reason I'm hearing the concern and taking that sounds like something we should consider. But to say never should we ever, it just seems like a missed opportunity for, like we get peer feedback, peer to peer. This could be another way for students to do that. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I come from. Is reality is right now, students are getting their first round of feedback from another student. And I'm willing to bet ChatGPT, for all its problems, probably does better than the average student. right? It's a really time consuming process to give feedback on writing. And here we are saying we want to have more writing and more feedback. And our teachers are, still telling us they're burned out. Where exactly is this all going to happen?
Well, I think like that, the writing feedback, I mean, I haven't done a lot of feedback on writing, but to me, the worry is, like, I'm fine having ChatGPT generate code for me, figure out a table, give me a list of potential titles or something, be a creative tool for me to choose amongst. But like when I'm writing, like, and there's, if there's a creative element to it, I don't want my the teacher being influenced by like how the average of everybody's work compares against my creative work. And I think it's like ChatGPT evaluating my artwork, right? Like I paint a painting and ChatGPT tells me how well I'm doing with it. It's like, no, it's supposed to, if we think we're humans, we think we have something that's a little beyond, maybe we're not humans, but like this idea, I see a distinction, I guess, between artwork, like writing, and something that's trying to express something versus something where fact-based things, scientific-based things, or as part of a creative process. But like when it comes to evaluation of a creative work,
There's no evaluation.
But
Feedback.
feedback of a creative work, but evaluation, I don't see the distinction, right? Like the ChatGPT tells the teacher that like, oh, this could be said more succinctly like this, but it misses the whole point of the sort of creative.
But that happens with teachers too. Has teachers always gotten your writing? It's not ever I mean, you're lucky if that's true.
Yeah, I guess.
It's just, that's the difference between feedback and evaluation, right? Feedback is you should consider this. Evaluation is this is the score, right? It was right, wrong. It was a 7, it was a 9, it was a 10. Feedback is here's something to think about.
Okay, but I mean, I guess I don't see like as a teacher, the feedback I choose to give to a student, if that's initially coming from a robot, like I don't know, it's got to be guiding me in some sense.
Well, look, I mean, let me just kind of play that out a little bit. So if you get feedback on a first draft, right? You run it through generative AI, the AI gives feedback. Student and the teacher gives the feedback to the student, right? And then so then we get to the final point of where there is going to be a score placed on it. Theoretically, if it's working out the way we want students to respond to feedback, they've taken that feedback into account into how they craft the final product. But the feedback they're using hasn't been generated by the teacher who's giving the final grade. The feedback was generated by the machine learning that doesn't give the final grade. So there's a disconnect there.
Yeah, I mean, like if I often in writing, like you want to have sentences that are not grammatically correct. That's part of the writing, right? Like you need to do that in order to create like interest and intrigue in your writing. And like if AI like comes with feedback that's like, well, you need a comma and there's no verb in this sentence, and then like the teacher hands that to you, and then you're like, that's exactly why I did that. Like what? I now have to correct that to get the points from the teacher.
I think the same thing can happen with here. Okay.
Susan's been trying to jump in.
Oh, sorry.
Well, thank you. No, I just was, in my perspective, what I think we also have to be really careful with is helping our teachers and professionals that work with our kids know what sort of feedback we're asking for. So whether, if a teacher is looking for certain things based on certain criteria, there can still be creative and wiggle room there, but helping us ask AI what kinds of feedback to give or what to give feedback on is really as much or even more important, I think, when we're talking about creativity or where bias factors come in. And that is the case whether we're asking as a teacher AI to help us generate a lesson plan, and those biases and concerns are going to come into play there. So just as much as it would be if we're not doing a good job of asking AI what kind of feedback we want on that writing that the student has done, or the kind of writing that I've done as an adult. And so I think this is to me, the bigger issue of really trying to help us all learn how to prompt AI better in ways that can enhance learning and enhance society rather than get into this, we're all going to just use these words type of scenario.
Oops, sorry. No, and building on that and going back to Mark's scenario, worst case, ChatGPT says, change your writing this way, you change it, and then the teacher grades you down for it, right? That may happen. That's a failed experiment, but we have disclosure processes. We learn from that. I don't know how we move down this road without making some mistakes. So the argument that there are going to be some mistakes that are made, just to me, is not a compelling reason not to go down this road. The disclosure clause is very intentionally in there so that we are learning from these mistakes and evolving and adapting and improving. But I just don't know how, saying we can't do it unless we're never going to make a mistake or do something wrong is the same as saying we're going to wait 10 years.
Well, what I'm hearing a little bit in here too is, maybe the two things, there's using AI, right? And then there's the process of education around AI. Which I think I hear sort of explicit discussion of in the policy, and then allusions to. And we want to be working with students and faculty around, what is generative AI? What's the difference between different types of AI? What are legal issues in the news, right? Current events, plenty of current events around generative AI. I follow a lot of educators online, and they'll do experiments, right? Showing students how you can interact with AI. What happens if you do this? What happens if you do this? Generate an essay, and then you critique it as a human. So I think there's a lot of ways in which the educational piece that all of, and I appreciate this conversation very much, the nuances, that all the educators and students can engage with together alongside that question of, well, how do we use it? What's that tension between overuse and underuse in job skills? So something I think we're not probably talking about very explicitly right now is how it will end up in all those different classrooms, the math classroom, the civics classroom, the writing classroom, the art classroom. So of course that will happen, right? So.
Yeah, we jumped to, as we said, when we started the feedback. I mean, there's, a whole section about how it might be used in other ways. So.
That's all great. That's
Marissa has her hand up.
Would we still, on assignments where AI was meant to be used to evaluate, would we still be using AI checker to evaluate plagiarism within a student's work? In that sense, if for a fact it's been through a process with an AI, would it go through an AI checker to check for plagiarism, or would that be foregone entirely?
Plagiarism checking is a different thing from generative AI. I don't think it's not on the table to take that tool away from teachers right now.
Not plagiarism checking, AI checking. There's many tools used to detect AI's hands in work. It was a huge problem over finals for college, where students were very confused when they received failing grades for using AI when Grammarly was the only thing used on it, and things like that.
Those tools, I would hope we're not using those tools. They don't work right now. But that's pretty different from, I would agree. We should not be using generative AI output checkers because they just don't work.
I guess my other sort of question on the feedback thing, right? Like, what is the role of the teacher? Like, I mean, the teacher isn't doing much by feeding into AI and getting the feedback. Like, the student can do that and get the exact same feedback. And like, I guess I'm not sure where this is, but like, that's more how I see it, as like students use the AI to get the feedback and give it to the teacher to evaluate, like, as opposed to why is the teacher doing that?
I mean,
well, and because the reason being that it takes it out of the hand of the person I see as the person in the room that's holding the creative space is the teacher, and if feedback coming from the teacher, wherever it came from, has a certain authority, whereas if it's delivered, the student has used AI and given the teacher this is what AI said, this is what I've used it in this process. Like, that's a whole different, to me, thing than like giving it to the teacher then lets like ChatGPT or
I don't think the teacher would be passing off chat or AI feedback as their own.
No, they'd be passing
They
that
can't.
as
Right.
ChatGPT.
Right.
Yeah.
But to me, that would be, I mean, there are all kinds of ways to do this. There's not
Yeah.
just one way. So one way would be, you know, the teacher and students sitting down together and reviewing this and going through it. That's one way. Like a teacher and student might do it together, as opposed to just the student doing it on their own, or the teacher doing it, seeing what it says, and then using that to incorporate, augment feedback to the student. So,
But if you're doing it that way though, so the teacher submits it to generative AI and gets the feedback. The teacher then needs to sit down, go through the feedback, evaluate generative AI's feedback on the student writing, and then meet with the student. That would seem to be more work for the teacher,
it
right?
depends, right? I mean, like you said, it might generate some thoughts for the teacher to like see things in just a different way. I mean, there's not just one way to do this, right? I think you were trying to say, what's the way? And I don't think there's
Yeah.
one way.
Well, there is a clean line you can draw, which is if you say students may submit it to AI and submit that along with their work and like use AI as part of like how the teacher can evaluate things. But the line you cross is whether the teacher submits the student's work to AI, and like you could keep AI in the generative process, in the feedback, in the evaluations and all that stuff, as long as it's the student who submits their work to AI and they take that step and they make that choice and they know it knowingly, and it's no extra work. It doesn't take anyone more training, really. You just have to put it in ChatGPT. It's not like a teacher needs to do it instead of the student, but it puts a certain ownership and knowing and about and sort of
It just limits what.
limits and it
Yeah.
creates a power dynamic, right? It's like
What
the students still have
That also creates a situation where the writing, at some point, it stops to be the student's own, right? If you're gonna keep submitting it through that, I don't know that I wanna go there either.
Well, no, I'm not saying you have to, but I'm saying
But
if
that
this is gonna
happens with
be a
peer
ChatGPT process.
review. I mean, it happens in different
Yeah.
ways already. It's just AI
Yeah.
is another tool.
I also feel, I mean, like, we can draw that line, Noah, but do I know that that's a wise line to draw? I don't think anybody on the screen does. I feel like we're in 1910, the first automobiles are appearing on roads, and we're trying to write the DMV manual right now. I really feel like we just have to embrace the fact that this is an experiment. We're jumping off a cliff. We're going to hit a couple of rocks on the way down. We're putting the guide rails in.
I'm so excited.
But they're going to be really tiny rocks because we're putting the guardrails in, right, to avoid the really big rocks. And we're back in
Yeah.
1910 with the automobile. We cannot prescribe this to an nth degree. We just have to put the really big rocks out there for discrimination, ethics, disclosure, and we just gotta let this grow and gel for a little while, and we're gonna find some bad mistakes and we're gonna fix them, but we're not going to violate it but we're not going to have let discrimination through, right? The really big rocks are kind of signposted away, but we are still going to have some regrettable incidents happening. But I don't know how you avoid that except go lock yourself in a closet for 10 years.
No, I mean, you just go a little bit slower. You don't jump off the whole cliff at once. Maybe. I mean, like really, like, I mean, I like teach AI, do all these things, but like you would have a certain beginning bright line, which is like that the students' evaluations aren't submitted by the teachers in ChatGPT or whatever until we understand and we can use it a little bit better. And I don't know, that's
So,
how I.
So who's better positioned to figure out the first step, the teacher in the classroom or us?
I don't know.
4 of us do teach.
It's cute.
We're at
None of
least
us
on the
teach high
same- no, that's true.
Not
I
a-
do a fair amount of feedback on writing.
I know you
appreciate
do.
having student board members, that's for sure.
I actually have another question. Sorry. Would we still encourage person-to-person peer review first, or would it be an either or? Because I am a part of the Writing Center, which is dwindling as is, and is a program that is really, really good for students. And I don't submit any of my peer-reviewed writing to the internet. Just personally.
I don't think it's a definitive, this must happen first and this. I think these are all like a menu of options, right? And I think the Writing Center's a great resource. So is in-class peer-to-peer feedback. And I think, you know, that peer-to-peer feedback is only as good as like what you're getting from that peer, right? And so it can be really bad sometimes and unhelpful, or it can be really great. And I think that generative AI is just another option in the menu, the way I see it.
And has those options as well. Or sometimes the
Yeah,
feedback,
Right.
It's a tool in the toolbox. And it's a tool we don't know very much about yet. So, I mean, I'm going to propose that, you know, the student opt-out was heard. I think we can work on some language about that. I haven't heard another issue. I know there's some disagreement about 11, whatever it is, either there's teacher feedback, but
If
we
you
can
could
deal with that by,
guarantee me that the method of using that Meredith described would be one that I'd be much more supportive of. That, you know, a teacher feeding the work through, getting the feedback back from the generative AI that they're using, evaluating that feedback, and then meeting with the student to go over it. I'd be totally on board with that. But I don't know that there's any way to guarantee that happens. And if one of the primary reasons for using this is to generate more writing and more feedback on writing, because teachers can't handle the workload now, because it's a huge amount of work to offer feedback on writing. If that's the goal, then doing it the way that Meredith describes doesn't accomplish that goal.
But that
In
was
fact,
one of like 3 ways. that
right,
it
right.
might be
No,
used.
no,
I
I'm
didn't
just
say
saying
this
that
is
that's the one
only way.
no, I'm not saying that's the one I'd be supportive of, right? I think that's a very good use of it, but in the reality is that adds more work, right? Because that's adding another.
I don't think it
another
necessarily
task.
does.
Well, how can it not? Because you have to read the student's work to evaluate what the generative AI offered for feedback. So it's another step. Like when I evaluate an essay, in like say an honors essay that I always give students an opportunity to revise, I sit there, I read the essay, offer the feedback, meet with the student has a choice to write a revision. If I'm running it through generative AI first, I have to then evaluate the generative AI feedback, which I can't really do honestly unless I've read the essay and done what I would do anyway.
I think
Yeah.
sometimes writing the feedback is as time consuming, depending on the length of the writing. For like middle and high school writing, generating the feedback requires, you know, a lot of time and thought. And if you have a starting point of some feedback that GAI has done, you can consider that, yeah, that I like how they said that. I would give that same feedback. It's there already.
No, I would agree with that.
So I don't
right?
necessarily know it's a time addition, but also wasn't putting that out as
No,
this is
I
the only way we should limit
I
teacher use.
completely, I grant that. I'm just saying that's the one
Yeah.
right? If that's the one that we're going with, I'm on board with that one. I'm not on board with the other.
But,
I'm
you know,
one, I'm,
go ahead, Susan.
I'm wondering if there's a way that the guidelines could say that teachers should review the feedback from AI before sharing it with students. Because I do think there's a lot of that is happening. I mean, that's how I've heard our teachers are using it right now. It doesn't mean that nobody's skipping that step, but that's where the professionalism and the knowing our kids and knowing the work and knowing the criteria, I think also comes into place. A lot of the examples that we've talked about tonight, rightly so, too, have been with high school students and high school writing. But if you're thinking about a 3rd grade essay, it's not going to take as long to read. But by putting that into an AI platform, teachers can get some really good feedback pretty quickly and think about that feedback and what of that feedback then do they want to give to students. So we're trying to do guidelines too for K-12, right? Not just long essays, I guess, to kind of keep in mind where we have to have some flexibility.
Right. I think that's a key point, right? I think feedback on a 5th grade writing might be much more useful from ChatGPT, right? The idea that it could speed things up is maybe much more relevant because much more basic things are missed. And also, you know, to Noah's point about only having the student do it, you know, these guidelines actually prohibit students under the age of 13 from using ChatGPT themselves. So there are cases where it may be only the teacher that can use generative AI for anybody who's pre-high school. And where was I headed with that? Well, I think, Mark, the point you're making about they have to, I think it's implicit in these guidelines already. Nobody's allowed to just spit out ChatGPT and slap it down somewhere, right? All over the document, it says professional judgment is required. You have to own the final output. You have to disclose your role in the process. So, I mean, I think it's kind of implicit already that a teacher has to
I
own
would
any
agree with that.
feedback.
I mean, that's fair enough, but implicit is often an opportunity and invitation to ignore, right? So anything,
So, I
anytime
mean,
someone says to me it's implicit, that's not good enough. Explicit is much more preferable.
so we could look at making it more explicit in section 11. Right? I mean, it already is down there, right? The last italic sentence in section 11. The use of GAA and providing feedback to student or producing rubrics is an extremely important case where the final ownership of the output by the teacher and the use of professional judgment are of paramount importance. I mean, it's kind of a little bit more than implicit already. But we could look at making that more explicit. I think this has been an excellent conversation on a difficult topic. I think maybe Meredith and I will put our heads together on the opt-out and maybe some more explicit language about owning feedback if it's run through the teacher. I mean, if I were a teacher, either I would tell the student to do themselves, or I would use it as a first step tool that I would then add significant value added to. I just can't see why a teacher, except for the case of a fifth grader who's not allowed to use ChatGPT, why a teacher would just run it through and turn that back to a student. So why don't Meredith and I take this feedback, and Susan's been a big part of this too, and we'll incorporate things and we'll bring it back in 2 weeks. Does that sound okay with people? Okay, so we do need to vote on just recognizing a first read, not endorsing the final language, but recognizing a first read has happened at the board meeting. We'll go ahead and take a vote. Jake,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Noah,
Aye.
Mark.
I
Also vote aye. Subcommittee reports getting, well, it's really late here. It's 2:30, but we still have one more good sized agenda item. Policy subcommittee, you've seen what we're doing. IJOA, which is water field trips, has turned out to be quite a complex exercise. So it's really good. Meredith highlighted that. Anything quick on UTC?
Yeah, they're doing great work. To Meredith Diamond's earlier point, they're implementing a new website sort of software system for enrolling students that will have greater transparency and more information for counselors to help with retention and placement. They're very excited about, and so are we. I'll say that's it for tonight. I'll say more next time.
Great. Spruce?
Nothing new, next meeting in February.
Okay, curriculum committee next week? No, this week, Thursday.
Postponed till February,
That's right, thank you. Yep.
February 8th.
Facilities and building, I think you got the key update from Meredith on that. Starting with the middle school process, it's a lengthy multi-stage, multi-year process, but the first baby step has been taken, so that's good.
I would just add that the roofing projects continue. And the ASA project, they moved into those spaces before the break. And the central office project is moving on, on schedule.
So ACE is all done.
Yes.
Oh, awesome. That's great.
Nobody
Sure,
can
they're
say we're not taking care of roofs, right? That hasn't been true in this
Right.
district for 30 years, but it is finally happening. DI leadership, I don't think there's been an update. We haven't met since the last time. Strategic plan, you guys are all part of that. We came up with a pretty strong draft of our core documents, mission, vision, values, and portrait of a learner. So just a couple tweaks there, and Meredith and I plotted out for next meeting. Really, we're turning the corner to starting to think about goals. So what are the goals that we want to bring in under those aspirational documents? So that's what the next couple of strategic plan meetings are going to be about. I hope you're all there next Tuesday. Anything else, Meredith?
Nope.
Okay, any other business? Any requests for future agenda items? Any public comment?
None in the room,
Okay,
Brian.
thank you. Our next meeting is 2 weeks from today, January 23rd, 6 PM in the library and on Zoom. Any requests for information or follow-up? I would make a motion to go into executive session under one MRSA 405-6D labor negotiations. Is there a second?
Second.
We'll go ahead and vote. Jake,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Noah,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
aye. I also vote aye. So carries 5-0. Everybody, we won't take any votes except for adjournment after this. So everybody else is welcome to head out. Thank you.
Staying on this Zoom for Brian.
I guess we need to probably have a different Zoom or a Google Meet.
Well, you can, if you go into security, you can turn off, you can enforce a waiting room so nobody can drop in.
Artists that I follow have their work. So.
So